All right, we're live. I'm Joshua Kemble. You'll probably notice a little bit of a difference in this stream, and it's that I should have some nice crispy tones. So I got a new mic, just not like a super fancy mic, but like a decent mic for recording. And it's something I've been meaning to do for years, and this is something I will say I just tend to do as a person quite often. Because I grew up like not super wealthy. When I was a kid, if I really wanted something, I'd like think about it for like years sometimes, and then kind of like save up and like mow lawns and stuff like that, and then finally like do like an expense. And I got like some gifts for an upcoming birthday because I'm a Gemini, so I got a birthday coming up. And some family gave me a little bit of like Amazon gift cards and stuff like that. And I was thinking, like, what's something in this realm, like budget, that I've been wanting? And that was one of the things, was just realizing I want to upgrade the sound quality of the show for you guys, because I noticed that the condenser mic I was using before had like a lot of mids, but it was also like getting just like pumped with gain. And so the only thing I haven't quite figured out, and Philip, I notice you're in the chats, maybe you can let me know if the quality sounds better. There is like a small hiss that I'm hearing. And I'm going to try to kind of mess with the mic settings to see if I'm able to kind of cancel out that room hiss. But other than that, like to me, it sounds remarkably better. And so I'm hoping it'll be the case for you guys. If I hear enough feedback, like, no, we missed the old mic, then great, I'll return this thing and go back to the old one. But I'm actually pretty happy with there's a couple things that are great about this mic, and I don't want to like oversell it because again, coming from like having been in bands and stuff like that, I know this is not like a high quality mic, but it's a much better one. And uh, Oh, cool. Okay. So Philip said, if I crank the audio all the way up, I can hear a very slight hiss, but otherwise you sound great. Great. And let me know if the levels are okay too, because I'm actually, here's the cool thing. There, if I want to, like, if I really want to, like, let's say for some reason, I had somebody on the stream who's like talking over me or something, which wouldn't happen. But let's say I'm in like some debate, which I never debate. But if I was, there is the potential to like up the gain so it kind of overpowers your mic and it throttles the volume, which is not a method I would want to use, but at least I know, hey, I got that tool at my disposal in case it's ever needed. The other thing that's a game changer for this is, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but on Artcasters and on all the other shows, I've been unable to hear myself through the headphones. So when I'm wearing headphones, it's like I'm hearing other people, and I'm not, and I'm not. It's just a funny thing because it's like I'm not able to kind of hear the volume of my own voice, and so much like if you're in a band or something and you don't have a monitor when you're singing and there's like instruments playing. You can sing like way too loud or way too low or be really off key and have no idea. Whereas now, I have the ability to like actually hear what I'm saying, and so that'll help me monitor. I naturally have a really loud voice, and I was noticing that because of that. Because of that headphone issue, I would just like speak super loud, like, and I already speak really loud, but I would, naturally, if your ears are muted, you're not hearing yourself, you're hearing other people, you're going to be speaking like 20 times louder than everybody in the room. And so hopefully this will make Artcasters a little more pleasant. I'm enough to deal with my personality of like interruption and like when I get excited about a topic, that like I think Scott and Corey deserve me not like yelling. So I'm excited about it. It's fun. It's fun to be able to kind of splurge a little bit for a birthday thing. And again, this isn't going to be a year where I like drop super amounts of cash on a guitar as much as I'd like to. I'm not. I'm trying to keep my guitar acquisition syndrome in check. So anyhow, that's kind of catching you guys up. Hopefully you enjoy the audio. And again, if you notice anything about the settings that you would want to change, like if it's too loud, if you're noticing it's peaking, which to me, I did a test. I even did like a pup, pup, pup. And I was like, wow, it's cool. Like I can say peas and it's the pop filter and then, pop resistor or whatever. And the mic itself like are able to handle like a P. S's are a little sharp, but that's actually probably a good thing. I'm kind of used to, it's funny hearing it, at least being able to hear it as I'm doing it. I feel like I've been doing, my live streams for like 200 episodes or something with like the audio quality of like talking through a sock. You're just like, that's kind of what the difference sounds like to me. So hopefully it's, again, maybe you guys aren't as much like care too much about the audio, but hopefully it makes it a more pleasant experience for you guys, because at the end of the day, that's kind of what this thing's about. Is like, I want to create content that's me hanging out with you guys while I'm working on art, maybe commenting on stuff. I think today we might do a commentary video on analogy as the core of cognition. So Adam Lohr, listener of the show, really good YouTube channel, and also is running, I think, the current Hundreds anthology. But he recommended a video about this dude. And now I'm like, why am I not seeing the title? Oh my goodness. Oh, so it's like Daniel Hofstadter. So anyhow, I was like, I watched it and it was a very like, it was really charming too, as well as like really thought provoking. Cause it's like a lot of philosophy, from like the late 60s and early 70s. And then the documentary thing itself was kind of creating some of his philosophical quandaries, which is funny. Cause I had heard a couple of the, he came up with a couple of ethical dilemmas or like existence dilemmas that are like really common, to kind of exercises, like thought exercises, like the brain in a vat. And so it's interesting because I had never connected him to the brain in the vat problem, which maybe he'll get into. But I'm really interested in it. He's like a philosopher. I think we're probably not in full agreement, because again, like I don't know everything about his philosophy, but from what I understand, I think he's very relativistic when it comes to morals and stuff like that. And for me, moral relativism has like a real slippery issue. And again, it's kind of like, it's another one of those weird topics, kind of like, I don't know why I keep delving into listening to these really interesting topics, but it's another one of those weird quandaries where, much like, the free will versus determinism kind of debate that's gone on for centuries, right? It's a similar thing with morality, where it's like, if there's a quandary with morality because we all feel, like most human beings feel like there's this sense of like a good and a bad, and it's like it's broader than ourselves, like it's a universal, this is evil, this is good. And so the idea of like that being a flexible line that's like culturally created creates all sorts of ethical dilemmas. The most classic one being, there's the internet joke that anytime there's a debate or an argument, it like instantly goes to, oh yeah, well Hitler did that, But it is one of those quandaries where the classic kind of problem with moral relativism is that kind of quandary that comes up where it's like, okay, so if society just kind of decides, like if everybody in a room decides what's moral in that room, or everybody in a country decides what's moral for that country, and it's just kind of like, if it's culturally their thing and the majority of people feel that way, then that's what morality is. That brings up a quandary, because if the minority of people get wiped out and you have the majority of people doing something that you think is morally or ethically really problematic, then it becomes like this whole quandary of like, well, does that make that thing suddenly moral, right? Which is a hard bullet to bite when you bring in the Hitler argument, right? Because I don't think anybody should say that was a good thing. So anyhow, Adam said Godwin's law. Is Godwin's law the whole like anytime there's an argument, people bring up Hitler? Anyhow, but I'm really excited to kind of check this out. I will say, if you're just tuning in, I'm not a philosopher. I'm not like some like deep. I like to think about things, but I don't consider myself like super brilliant or like I have any sort of intelligence that's like beyond anyone. I'm an artist. I do graphic design, illustration. I've been doing that for about 20 years now, and then I've been an art director for over 8 years now. And when I'm not working on those things, I'm usually working on graphic novels. So most of this stream is usually me working on different graphic novels. Currently, I'm working on a book called Not Death But Love: The Strange Supernatural Story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And and like it's a book for Turner Publishing that's a historical fiction comic that tells this story, an untold story about the poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning and her kind of deep dive into the world of seances and Victorian spiritualism, which is really interesting, and also kind of gets her into the throes of opium addiction and all sorts of like really juicy stuff. But it also has romance and humor. So it kind of feels like a Jane Austen novel, the way the script is written, mixed with. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with like Jeremy Brett's Sherlock Holmes, but like that to me is like the ominous vibe. If you ever watched I think it was Panorama. That was it. Panorama. My. Oh, okay. My said no. Oh, it was just the BBC, I guess. But Panorama is BBC. Oh well. Anyway, whatever. My wife would know because she's a huge fan of Jeremy Brett's Sherlock Holmes. But anyhow, there's a. Sorry, what? Yeah. I want to say it's BBC Panorama, but I could be wrong. But I know it was BBC. So there we go. BBC One. Anyhow, uh, so then we have that kind of ominous vibe though. Like if you've ever seen that version of Sherlock Holmes, there's this like kind of very mysterious, like it's kind of a perfect tone for like a Victorian era mystery, and it's got that kind of suspense and ominous vibe to it while also being a little romantic and very cool. So I'm excited about it, but that's what I'm going to be working on today. So that's what I'll work on during the stream. And then Adam confirmed that's what Godwin's law is. So that's good to know. That's like internet 1.0. Like, unfortunately, like a lot of my jokes are going to be internet 1.0 because I'm an old dude. So, but let's see here. Adam said, I always get that Austin Powers song stuck in my head when BBC is mentioned. Me too. um, uh, all right. So what we're going to do on Not Death But Love is color a page. We colored 3 panels out of 6 on the stream last night. And again, like, if you guys notice any audio issues, I'm still dialing this thing in. So let me know. First off, do you feel like it's an improvement? Does it sound better than like yesterday's? That would be good to know, because again, this thing just arrived and I can literally return it. So so it's like, if it's not a step up, I'd rather get my money back, right? But I feel like, just personally, it feels and sounds a lot better to me. But then again, that's going to be a little different because, again, I've been running kind of blind, like where I haven't even been able to hear myself when I'm wearing headphones and talking to people, which is kind of like plugging your ears and talking to people. Just imagine like how much your voice will go just huge just to compensate for that. And then add into it that I have a ridiculously loud voice, which is a blessing and a curse, right? Like, a good thing for an art director is the ability to speak to crowds, right? To speak to groups. Like, when you're in a leadership position, being able to be comfortable and speak in front of like multiple people and be heard and project your voice without literally yelling. It's really a blessing in those cases to have like a really outgoing, talk too much, have a loud volume kind of personality. It's very beneficial in the sense of like I've done really well whenever I've done panels at comic conventions, because again, like, I can kind of win over a crowd, and I can also like articulate like very loud. And so again, like that's really helpful if you're in a small room and you need to like project. But if you're in a one-on-one conversation, or you're hanging out with like two friends at a coffee shop, and every word you're saying can be heard across the restaurant and nobody else can, that's not the most fun experience for the people dining with you, right? So like I said, blessing and curse. But hopefully this will keep that in check as well. Let's see here. Oh, Philip Chandler is I knew Philip was on, because actually I think Philip, you were the first guy in the chats. But he said he's doing not too bad. He feels like he has a lot on his plate trying to juggle, but I'm doing okay-ish. I relate. I feel like this is just one of those super busy seasons, and I have a lot that I'm juggling as well. But I feel a little better. I know this is corny, because I'm wearing a shirt with donuts on it, and that made my day better. Like, it was a really juggly, overloaded, crazy day, especially at my day job, because it's like being on a creative team is tough. Like, there's tight deadlines and all sorts of like visual stuff that you just have to like pump out, and it can be exhausting. But again, like, I don't know what the trick was. So Philip, I'm just giving you a pro tip. Like, maybe just get a donut shirt, and that'll make you feel better. I don't know. It made my day a little better. I was like, I like that they're kind of subtle too, so I could like walk by people and be like, I'm wearing donuts and you don't even know. You do not know. And then dad jokes with donuts just flew all over the place. All right, enough of like just seeing my face. By the way, you're also going to see my wife in the background, who's slaving away on her children's books, because I made her. I'm just kidding. She's actually chained there. No, I'm just kidding. No, she's a children's book illustrator, and so like quite often we're both kind of illustrating late into the night. So, but if you've ever watched these streams and I haven't mentioned that, by the way, that's my wife, it might be a little ominous that every time I turn, you just see the back of a head, like poltergeist style, in front of this like flashing screen. My wife was saying it's a ghost. Okay, so let's get into this. Let's see where the night takes us. But regardless, hell or high water, I am finishing coloring this page tonight, and so I'm pretty excited about that. Oh, that's cool. Adam said, glad things are not too bad to Philip, and then said, I got a lot done drawing outside for a change. Nice. Drawing outside. Well, no, you don't need donuts, Philip. You need donut shirt. That's all. Just a shirt with donuts on them. I think at our age, like, donuts are one of those things you can do maybe once a year and then regret for like 3 months. Anyhow, let's see here. But yeah, that's cool. That's cool, Adam, that you drew outside. I haven't drawn outside in a long time. That's actually really that's an interesting idea. I one of my favorite things in the planet, and I think Philip's kind of like this too, because Philip's has a lot of background doing caricatures and stuff. There is a really fun challenge of drawing in a sketchbook and just observing people. It's one of the most like meditative, fun experiences I ever experienced. Like, I just enjoy it. Like, to me, a really fun time. Like, if I went to like Disneyland or something, to me the most fun thing to do there would be to like chill and like like at one of the outdoor restaurants in Disneyland and just draw the strange people I see around me. Like find that person who's just got like the coolest nose, or like the weirdest ears, and like just or just an interesting posture or something like that, and just like gesture it out. That's literally like super fun. I used to hate doing that, especially in art school when that was like an assignment kind of thing. But now I actually like daydream about it when I'm working on client work, which is funny because when I was in art school, it was like the reverse, where I'm like, I don't want to draw in a sketchbook. I want to get paid to draw. And now it's like, I don't want to get paid to draw. I just want to draw in my sketchbook. Somebody give me money for that. Anyhow, but yeah, the idea the point being, like, that sounds really nice, Adam. I'm glad you were able to like get outside and kind of uh, experience the joy of drawing outside. I haven't done that in a while. It's a good reminder. Maybe I'll try to do that this weekend. And also, Adam, thanks for the tip on Hofstadter, because it was a really fascinating documentary. It made me curious about just his modern stuff, because he's I don't know if he's still alive, honestly, but I think he is. I know that this lecture that I was going to watch is from 2009, so I thought it would be interesting to hear some of his more current stuff, just to see like how his ideas evolved as like cognitive science has evolved and stuff like that. But it was also fascinating to connect. I finally was able to connect the, like, when it got on that documentary, Adam, to the point where it's showing the brain in a vat. I was like, man, this is so familiar. And then I, like, halfway through it, I'm like, oh yeah, the brain in the vat problem. Like, it's like a modern adaptation of like the shadows on the wall kind of conundrum, where it's like, what if you were really just in a cave just seeing projections on a wall, right? And you think it's reality. It's like the more modern version of that is the brain in the vat conundrum, where it's like, what if right now, like, all your experiences are, just simulated in your brain, and your brain's just floating in a vat? Or if you were able to like detach your brain from your body, have electrical cords connecting it to your body so that your eyes and everything else kind of remain in your body as you're walking through, like, say, Las Vegas, and your brain's in Seattle in a vat. Would it matter that your brain's in Seattle in a vat? And like, what sort of experience is it? Like, is your soul in your brain, or is your soul something else? It's like a whole interesting, it opens up a lot of like thinking through, like, one of the fun things about those ethical dilemmas is that it opens up like a lot of thinking, and not necessarily hard answers, but a lot of hard questions, right? So yeah, it was kind of neat to connect that. Let's see here. Yeah, Adam said Douglas Hofstadter is still alive. Yeah, cool. So I'm kind of curious to hear a little bit more, and I'm guessing it'll be interesting, because I think, like I said, I probably don't agree with. I may not even be compelled to kind of go in his side philosophically, but it's especially when it comes to moral relativity. But again, like, always fun to hear a new person and a new perspective. And again, who knows? I mean, maybe he makes a really good case. And I'm sure he probably does. I mean, guy seems like a pretty smart guy. I think the thing I was going to watch was like hosted on Stanford's site. So, kind of a deep thinker. All right, enough of this rambling. I've literally rambled for 22 minutes, and I need to be working on comics. Okay, so let's get into it. So here's my daily stream. You'll notice a few things, like here's my face right in front of you. Right down here is, I'll adjust that camera. That was just focused on my social security card, which isn't, no, I'm just kidding. That would be funny. It's like the whole time here is just like some really valuable. Yeah, it's like, and here's my credit card number. Like, no, down here is my my Wacom tablet. And I always like showing working on the Wacom tablet, for one, for visual interest, because when I do traditional work, I usually will do like an overhead and then just a camera showing my face, and then I can like traditionally ink, and you're kind of seeing the process. But digitally, you kind of miss the fact that there's still an element of hand done. Like, even though you're digitally drawing, you're still drawing, right? But I also like showing this because I think it's encouraging for people who think you have to drop just like mad amounts of cash for a tablet. Because this tablet, you could probably get this used for like $20. This is just a blank. It's not a fancy screen or like anything like that. And honestly, this thing's gotten me through like 8 years. Well, not 8 years, but like 5 or 6 years of just like hardcore usage. Because, like, again, I work on graphic novels, and like even traditional ones, I still have to scan and clean up. And like this tool, the Wacom tablet's really helpful for that. It ups my speed a lot. But I like showing that because a lot of people feel like they have to drop just crazy amounts of money that they don't. And I love that Jim Lujan, who was on the show a couple days ago. He's always on Artcasters, friend of mine. Really brilliant animator. But one of the things I really like about him when he talks to animators who are kind of holding back because they're like, oh, I was waiting for this program, or I was waiting to get like a better whatever, like, and it's all like usually like a tool problem where it's like, oh, I just don't have the tools. But once I have the tools, I'll do animation. And I love Jim's approach to it, where he's just like, well, you have a phone, right? And you have like a Sharpie and a napkin. Like you can literally make animate like this day and age for like no money, as long as you have like a smartphone. It's like you could literally download an app and make an animation with a napkin and a Sharpie. You don't need, I mean, all the other stuff's nice, but it's like, don't let tools like hold you back. And I think the same thing. Like, if you want to try out a Wacom tablet because you're working digitally and you're still working on a mouse, shame on you. You shouldn't. Just get a cheap Wacom, and then get used to it. It takes a little bit more time to get used to, I think, than drawing on a screen. But like once you get in the flow of it, it'll speed up your process. And again, it doesn't have to break the bank. Even this mic, like, again, I'm not like, I got a nice mic this time. For me, it's kind of pricey, but like I know from like working in music, well, not working in music, but I used to play in bands when I was younger. There's a band I was in that almost got signed. We were getting like vetted and courted by like an agent long ago in my ancient days. But back then, like if you went into like a really good studio, and you're singing into a condenser mic, it's like a $3,000 mic. That's not this. Like this didn't even break, like, after the gift cards and stuff. I think this cost me $40, but the gift cards like combined and stuff like that, it's maybe like $100 mic. And again, I didn't let that stop me from live streaming. Like I used to just go through the audio that was direct on my on just my computer, and then like from there I went to like a cheap condenser or a Blue Snowball mic that I used to use with Kevin Cross. That used to be a really good mic back in the day of like early podcasts. It wasn't the best mic, but it was pretty cool. It was one of the first like USB connected mics. And then I went from that to like, that wasn't working so well. So I went to like a cheap condenser mic that, again, like I think worked a little better, but now I'm like finally upgrading. So like, again, it'd be a shame to just like wait for all the cool tools to show up before you start something, because you don't always need all the cool tools. In fact, sometimes the cool tools can actually make stuff less fun. Like, there's something really charming about a punk rock band just recording. I mean, like the Stooges, right? Iggy and the Stooges is one of the best tones you will ever hear, like ever, for music. Like it's just, even if you don't like their music, it's like there's something raw about their tone and the sound and like the shreddiness of the guitars and stuff. It's just such powerful recordings. And like those things were recorded for like nothing, like, and I think in a garage, right? So it's like, yeah, don't, be the guitarist who needs like the 50, monitors and Pro Tools and all that stuff just to play your guitar. Like, or like the $10,000 guitar. Just get a $50 guitar or $20 guitar at a pawn shop and like in a garage and like a tape recorder if you don't have a computer. Like it's not, anyhow. Yeah, Adam was saying lo-fi. Yeah. So anyhow, I'm only saying that just to like encourage people. Like, I feel blessed to have all the things that the tools that I use now, and some of them are expensive. My computer wasn't cheap, but it's like, but I've been doing, graphic novels since I could. And like, and again, like I've worked around limitations, like financial limitations and stuff like that. And like, it's doable. It's totally doable. So don't let, rich people, bum you out or bring you down. Don't let the bastards get you down. Speaking of, we're going to get into doing art because we're now at like about 30 minutes. The only thing I want to tack on before we get into art is right now it looks like there's about 5 people watching. So, it'd be cool if like 5 people like hit the like just before we get into drawing and the meat of this whole thing, maybe doing live commentary. I want to hear also in the chats Are you guys cool with like checking out Hofstadter's analogy as the core of cognition while we draw? I think it'll be really fun. I think it does kind of tangentially relate to yesterday's stuff that we were kind of listening to, and I think it'll be interesting. Philip said, "Isn't that Jay Baker's line?" What? I don't know. I don't know who Jay Baker is. Is that terrible? I'm so ignorant. Um, yeah, Adam was saying I'd love to see the Hofstadter video, and I thought that would be cool too because Adam literally recommended the first one. And it was really interesting and also kind of charming. Adam, I don't know if you intended this, but I think you did because I think you and I have similar aesthetic interests, and there's something aesthetically like pleasing as hell about that video because it's like it's such a like snapshot of that era, like the hipster music from the time. It's got like it's got like Columbo type soundtrack to it, and then like the cool technologies all like it's like it's the past's version of the future in the way that it's being presented, but it's still really well done, and the ideas hold up, but it's just such an interesting edit. And there's something really charming about just like the grain and like the time era and everybody's clothes. It's like it makes me want to like be like a 60s intellectual, go to like a coffee shop and talk about cognition. you know so there's charm to that too. I don't know, Adam, if like, yeah, I'm sure that's probably a part of it too, other than just the ideas are great, but the era that it captures is really there's something really charming about it, outside of that, just on top of that. Okay, I got my tea. I partially have tea right now because I get horrible, awful allergies. And I don't know if you guys know this, but like at least for me, like tea really helps like your throat not get that like itchy thing. And it also like for me is a nice way. Like I'm a bit of a coffee addict, and to be fully transparent, like I've gone like I'm also a night owl, and so like those two were like this toxic mix I had like for the last few years, where about this time of night I'd be downing like a whole pot of coffee and just cranking out work till like 6 in the morning, and then going to work at like 8, which is not sustainable. So so tea is also a nice substitute for that because it's like way less caffeine, and so it's not like by having like a cup of tea I'm going to be like laying down and not able to sleep and being like, you know what, I'm going to work on my comic. Okay. Oh, Adam was saying, Phil, do you mean the line about "Don't let the bastards get you down"? Is that Jay Baker? Now I want to know. I should probably know who Jay Baker is if that's from him. Okay, so let's get into this. Oh, okay. Philip Chandler said, "Oh, that's weird. That's a bit of a long story. His father is Jim Baker. Yes, the one from the 80s scandal. Oh my goodness." And he said Jay is also a preacher, but he's more left. But okay. Huh. He has a church called Revolution, and that line is sort of their slogan. Huh. That's weird. I thought "Don't let the bastards get you down" was like... Now, I have to admit, I actually don't remember the origin of that. That's a phrase, but I think that goes back to like freaking all the way back to Woody Guthrie, from what I understand. But maybe I'm crazy on that one. I always thought it was like Woody Guthrie, but I also have like totally had those moments where I've seen like an internet quote where it's attributed to like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and I know for a fact that it's not something Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, but people are like meme sharing it on Facebook, like, look at this brilliant quote by FDR, and it's like it's not FDR. So I don't know, like that might be one of those misconceptions in my head. Oh, nice. Yeah, I could understand that. I mean, if that's like their tagline, that would totally make sense. Okay, guys, we're going to do this. We're going to work on comics. After all this dallying around, all this... It just dawned on me. Suddenly I'm becoming like a weird English gentryman. Like, I've pish posh on all this dilly dallying. Let's get into the content here. Let's listen to this excellent, exquisite lecture from Stanford University and get into doodle dallying day. That's kind of where I feel like I was going tone wise. Okay. Here. Oh, pip, pip, old chaps. How would you talk to a chat room in that like old like British hunter? Like you need to be wearing like a pith helmet, like that. Okay. Here's a thing. I need to make like a challenge here where if I reach a certain cap or something as a streamer, that I will do a live stream in a pith helmet as like a strange colonial like British soldier, like not even soldier, an explorer, you know. And then we could talk about like explore the art for the for the great kingdom of Britain. Let us conquer this art, and like just do just like a whole thing. That would be hilarious. I think with a pith helmet, I'd have to actually be wearing a pith helmet. Okay, let's do this. Let's get into drawing and let's put on the Hofstadter thing and see where it goes. The other thing that's going to be interesting is as I've been doing commentary in the past too, I haven't been able to hear myself talking during the commentary, so it's hard for me to judge whether if I comment as it's playing, whether what I'm saying is audible or not for you guys. And so like I have to pause a lot more. Hopefully in this, I'll still pause and comment and stuff because again, I don't want to just rip off content. I want to provide some commentary of like my thoughts on it too. But at the same time, like, hopefully it'll flow better. So again, me just rambling for about 35 minutes about how excited I am to have a new mic so that I can sound good in your ears. That's right. Okay. As good as I'm gonna sound with my goofy voice. Okay, let's go. Let's do this. Let's rock and roll. Yeah. Okay, so we got our YouTube video pulled up. I'm gonna hit play. Oh, let's see. Yeah, there we go. Okay, Adam. So that was a little closer to what I thought. Adam was saying the phrase "Don't let the bastards get you down" originated from World War II with a fake Latin. Yeah, I can't. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Illegitimi non carborundum. Carborundum. I want to roll the R on that. Also, the name of a Woody Guthrie song. And a lyric in multiple songs. Man, I'm in a goofy mood. Rolling R's, sounding like a pith helmet wearing colonial British gentleman. Nice. And so it was a Woody Guthrie song too. That's good. Okay. Yeah, that's probably Philip was saying. Yeah, he didn't know that. That's probably where Jay got it. Yeah, I mean, they probably just borrowed it and like because it's kind of like. It's kind of a really common saying, especially I will say very much on the left when organizing rallies. Also in the punk rock scene, like that's just a common thing to say if you're playing a show and the audience sucks, or like so it's just like such a common phrase that I had kind of disconnected it from its origin. So. That's where we need like Dee Dee. Like I feel like Dee Dee, whenever she's in chat, if I mention etymology, she's just like, boom, etymology originated in, like she knows the date, the region, the like. Although that was a pretty good etymology, Adam. I really appreciate it. Okay, let's rock and roll, guys, and let's check out this analogy as the core of cognition and work on coloring panel 3.
Stanford University.
Like here. This is from Stanford, ladies and gentlemen. We're being very sophisticated today. Sorry, I'm gonna make more jokes because I mean, sure, I have a master's degree, but I went to a Cal State, okay, like, and I'm proud of it. But I have to admit, like, I do have a respect for like high institutions, but I do think it would be funny. Like, have you guys ever seen the South Park where everybody's getting high on smug, like, and they just basically start like enjoying the smell of their own farts, and they're like, "Oh, I need some more smug." It's like I do feel like when you're about to play a Stanford lecture, you have to kind of demystify it a little bit by being like, let's do this. Let's think very deeply now. Okay. Anyhow, let's continue. This should be cool. I don't even know if this is going to relate to the brain in the vat or any of the other concepts that he's known for.
Thank you for your help with the seating. We very much appreciate it. With a lecture of the fame and stature of Douglas Hofstadter, we get a fantastic turnout, and it's marvelous. Don't worry if someone who was coming to meet you here hasn't arrived. They will at least hear the lecture out in the lobby. So there's a chance to get some small part of the action out there. And we're just very happy you all came. This is a presidential lecture.
Presidential lecture is pretty cool.
By the president and administered by the Stanford Humanities Center. And we're very happy to have been able to invite Douglas Hofstadter, and even more happy that he has accepted. Do take a look at the presidential lecture website, which is accessible through the Stanford Humanities Center website.
I should mention that.
hc.stanford.edu.
So this is on Stanford's
Glenn
YouTube
Worthy,
channel.
Who's here tonight, has invested a lot of time and attention in presenting
and the lecture
Doug's
is
work in the most complete and analytic possible way. It's a real publication on Hofstadter and worth your attention. Should you need to learn more about
it's called
the
Analogy as the Core of Cognition, just so you guys know, because I'm going to be commenting on this. If after the fact you want to watch the actual content, you can find it on Stanford on YouTube.
If you become deeply curious about the publications and materials that are out front and would like to see more about us,
it's kind of a long intro
on that website.
I guess it's a formal lecture.
Tradition at the presidential lectures is not to have Q&A this evening, but to have a real discussion seminar tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock. That seminar will be at the Humanities Center, and the directions, if you don't know how to get there, are on that same website, shc.stanford.
Sorry guys, this is from 2009, so you can't go to that event that he's mentioning.
So I'm happy to turn now to an introducer who truly needs no introduction. Donald Kennedy, the former president of Stanford University, the editor of Science, a reasonably well-known magazine, and of course, a scholar of great distinction in biology and environmental studies. So I will now, with no further ado, turn.
Okay, guys, I just gotta get in Stanford mode. I gotta get my immaturity out because I was. He said with distinction in biology, and the junior high kid in me was like, "Your mom has distinction in biology." I don't know why. I'm usually not that bad. I can be immature, but that one was pretty ridiculous. Okay, silliness out. Stanford lecture. We're doing deep thoughts tonight, guys. Deep thoughts. Not your mom jokes at the cost of a Stanford lecturer. and people might have watched this and wondered, why did you go to Cal State? That's probably why. I don't know if I would have cut it at that school. I would have cracked a joke like that. Gone the next day. Okay, let's continue. Vic just said hello, my enemy. I think to Philip. How's it going, Vic?
This is a fantastic turnout, and I
Can
hope
you guys hear it
Doug
okay?
knows how much of a tribute it is to the influence he's had on the
Nice.
thinking of a
Vic's
large
joining
number of
in.
people, not only on this campus, but everywhere. It's a great privilege to introduce him. His family and mine were neighbors on San Juan Hill for a time.
San Juan
Doug
Hill.
left his house before I got into Hoover House, but we had met on several occasions and actually became colleagues for a while at a time during which I persuaded
cool.
him to do some
Philip
teaching
says
in the
I can
human
hear it very
biology
well.
program
That's good.
to the benefit of our students.
And my
And I saw a
comments are
great deal
coming
of
through. That's
Lori as she
exciting.
moved from bio major at Stanford to science writer, and I'm glad that she and some members of her family could be here. In Doug's human bio period, he was working on Gödel, Escher, Bach, hereafter GEB. When the book came out, I not only thought it was a stirring accomplishment, I experienced that voyeuristic feeling of having some association, however transient and tenuous, with a great literary triumph. Nowadays, I get the occasional additional dose of that by getting David Kennedy's misdelivered mail, but fortunately, Doug also keeps me going with more achievements of his own. And indeed, so much has been said of Doug and the power and luster of his intellect in that splendid piece by Glenn Worthy. There's not much that can be added to it, but there's a question. And the question is, what kind of linguist, mathematician, cognitive scientist hybrid does it take to think up ambigrams, the carinium, metamagical, and so on? Answer: a charismatic imagination and an extraordinary gift for exploring how we think by substitution and analogy.
Oh, I should pause here. So, I'm sure they're going to get into this a little bit, but one of the cool things about the documentary that Adam had linked to me, and Adam, if you want to mention what that documentary was in the chats, please let people know, because I'm blanking out on the name of it. But it's good. But like one of the things that was fascinating about it was kind of the fact that, and now I'm blanking out on the point I was going to make. I thought it was actually a pretty keen point too. Oh yeah. The fact that he was really intelligent when it came to conversations about AI, and that was really interesting because he was talking about kind of like this is like back when AI is like more of like a blue sky process because computers are still kind of being developed. And so most of what computers are being used for at that point in time is like running data and statistics. Like they don't even have, this is like back when computers like filled a room, right? And so like to use a computer, like you'd have to go to like the computer room, right? Because the room is literally like wall to wall computers and stuff. And so it's interesting to hear somebody talking about AI like so ridiculously accurately like that early on. That was really interesting too. So I just wanted to give him credit for that too, and let you know that like not you, Adam, but you guys, like whoever's watching, that some of this stuff, especially if he starts bringing up some of the AI concepts, are like super relevant to now, like very relevant to like some of the things that AI is going to be approaching, and that's pretty interesting. So anyhow, let's continue.
Fluid concepts and creative analogies, a work product that has grown out of a group he has relabeled as the Fluid Analogies Research Group, FARG.
Oh, crazy. Okay, so the film's Victim of the Brain from 1988. So I guess the film's not that old, but I think Hofstadter was like talking about the AI stuff like back in like the 60s, which is crazy. But in that case, it wasn't done back when computers were in a room, but it was still like very early on, kind of like pretty accurate assessments. Okay. Oh, nice. Okay. Vic said my enemy comment was referring to Adam because I started a thing to spite him. Oh, okay. I get it. I did a similar thing with Gary Hodges where there was like we were on like a disagreement arc for a good month and a half. It was like we're on a disagreement Cold War now, where it's like we've kind of de-escalated our Cold War, but there's still like, I'm sure we're brewing our arsenals of disagreements in the background just in case we decide to start stockpiling disagreements with each other again. We were in like a disagreement space race, where like anytime one of us was live streaming, we'd go on the other stream and disagree with everything, just out of principle. So anyhow, I will tell you guys, those were there who were there to observe the horrors of that standoff. Only a few survived, and we're willing to kind of even tell the tale of the disagreement arc with Gary Hodges. Okay, let's continue this very intelligent lecture. Okay.
1-0 short of North
We
Dakota.
haven't gotten to the lecture.
The catalog, more formal than playful like Doug, lists him as director of Indiana University's Center for Research on Concepts and Cognition. My friend Bill Kaufman was one of those whom Doug asked about publishers and other practical matters in the early days of pre-GEB. Bill's company, W.H. Freeman, had merged for a while with Scientific American of the Peel-Flanagan era. Longtime admirers of Martin Gardner's wonderful Lewis Carrollian mathematical games column in that magazine were devastated about Gardner's announced retirement. But when Doug was announced as his replacement in 1981, everyone who knew him said simply, how perfect. His incorrigible playfulness with language and anagrams led him to redo the title to Metamagical Themas.
Let's see here. Vic said, you allow AI in an anthology, so I decided not to join, but I wanted to be part of one, so I made my own so I can keep the generated stuff out. You got to hold to your standards, man. All right.
He didn't disappoint us in a tenure that lasted 2.5 years. Doug and I talked earlier today about the shared experience of being edited by Dennis Flanagan at Scientific American, one of the truly persistent ego restructuring and capable editors of all time.
Okay, sorry, I keep having to interrupt. So Adam, I think that would be a funny bit to include in the next I think your next comic, you should say edited by Douglas Flanagan. Just like a deep cut, you know, like you're writing a Stanford paper, you know, but like, especially it should be on like a very silly comic, not one that's like incredibly serious. I'm just saying you can borrow that bit. That's I lend it to you, but that might be a funny little inside joke. Okay.
Mind my telling a bridging story that has some personal meaning for me. Doug is deeply interested in language, how we use it, and what it tells us about how we think.
Yeah, Vic, Toad Road would be perfect for it. Like maybe Toad Road 3, just in the little, like maybe make a little note at the bottom that says edited by Douglas Flanagan. Okay.
Experience at the University of Oregon while doing a PhD in physics. That had followed a good experience with math as a Stanford undergraduate and a disappointing one in a math graduate program at Berkeley. And at Oregon, he happened to develop a sideways interest in the question how gender is used in language, e.g. How is it that many of us in that day were saying men when we meant everybody? Now we say guys when we mean everybody. And that's just.
I should mention this too. I believe that he was. I believe Hofstadter was friends with, is highly influenced by Noam Chomsky, because a lot of people know Noam Chomsky for like his political stuff. You know, the idea of like manufacturing consent, that kind of stuff, which is great. But Chomsky was also like really big on like language and linguistics and etymology and like the deeper meanings and symbolism and like the heavier weight of like communication and like words. So it's interesting to me that there's like a crossover there, and that they were actually friends, which I thought was cool.
That's dumb a mistake. So anyway, his interest in linguistic sexism, for some reason, linked him to a talk I had given in the very early 80s at, of all things, a senior athletes dinner at Stanford. I used some data about women's times in events like swimming and the marathon, and how rapidly the performance gap between women and men had narrowed. As an example, I compared the Stanford women's 400-meter freestyle relay time in 1981 with the best men's college time of my undergraduate years, and discovered that the women were 10 whole seconds faster than the fastest men. 10 seconds is a long time if you count it out. And that's what I did at the senior athletes dinner. It was quite a good talk, actually. And Doug put a snippet of that in his column in Scientific American, and I was totally thrilled. It was a far more interesting take on that.
Nice. Philip said he's got to go to bed. Thanks for hanging in. Thanks for hanging out there, Philip. Have a good night.
That suggests
Get some
a lot
rest.
about the exceptional range of connections that Doug is prepared to trace and analyze. The essence of his work has been to understand cognition, how we construct our knowledge of our world. The notion of some core as essential to the way in which we link the features and structure of thinking and language is brought out in GEB in the features and structures of three very different creative and intellectual accomplishments. And that speaks to the use he makes of computers and artificial intelligence notions, or the problem of translation, which has interested him, or perhaps as a way to explore for some underlying formal structure. In the preface to the 25th anniversary edition of GEB,
have a good night.
He chided some critics who
and Philip, have
a
pleasant dreams.
Three men.
I just
That's
wanted to say that
Moby
in the
Dick
most
is a book about
creepily out of place way. Pleasant dreams to you, sir. Okay.
About whaling. GEB is about how animacy arises. And in subsequent work, Doug has explored a variety of connections or braids with that theme between cognition and language, between what is written in one language and then translated into another, between what has left life and what remains. Not only does he navigate those boundaries, he does so with a kind of loving respect that is perhaps best captured by the fact that he and his children, Danny and Monica, now teenagers, maintain an Italian-only household conversation rule as a custom of honoring Doug's beloved late wife, Carol, a fellow explorer of the translation universe.
Huh.
At a time
That's kind
when
of a cool
university,
idea.
this one, is on a crash course to embrace and support interdisciplinary work. It is especially wonderful to hear from someone who has been there and who has set out new benchmarks for thinking that loops around cognitive science, machine intelligence, art, literature, perhaps eventually neurobiology. You get a picture of his agility and playfulness from some of the titles of his presentations. The Architecture of Jumbo, that one's about machine learning. The Slippable Alphabet, Hinge Points of Thought, Speech Stuff, and Thought Stuff.
So Vic was saying, how do you not get this stuff taken down, Josh? Because I would love to have stuff like this when I'm drawing, because I get boring a lot. So I'm kind of new to the whole commentary thing. But from what I understand, as long as I'm kind of like actually giving commentary, I think it's okay. If somebody like flags it, I'll have to pull the video. But I feel like it's a pretty, I think anybody watching the video, it would be pretty clear that I'm both commenting on it a lot. I'm usually not playing the entirety of the content. And then aside from that, I'm also generating art during it. And so it's one of those things. However, there are some things you want to be really cognizant of. I do try to pick lectures or kind of things that are a little more acceptable and less litigious. Whereas I feel like if you used like, if you're listening to like the Beatles, you're done. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not going to watch like a documentary on the Beatles or something like that. So far so good. We'll see if these work. It's something I'm kind of trying out because I've seen a lot of streamers do this when, like a lot of political streamers that I really enjoy, when they live stream, they'll kind of watch content and comment on it. And so I thought, I mean, hell, I do that when I'm working. I like these kind of heavier lectures, and so I feel like, I'm probably okay. Adam was saying fair use is supposed to cover educational stuff and commentary. However, and Thomas was saying the videos you pick are not very monetized. Probably happy to have a viewer, and that's the thing too. So there's a couple things I'm really conscious of. One is I'm always going to mention what the source is, like multiple times throughout the stream, so people can check it out without my commentary, for sure, because these things are interesting and probably should have like attention. But yeah, that's a good question. It's a line that obviously I want to be ethical in. So, but yeah, so far so good. We'll see if like a year from now, like half my live streams are pulled, then then I was wrong. Vic says, do you think if I were to have a public domain garbage horror movie, they would have a problem? It depends, because if you're so the line you want to, with content like that, the line you want to be careful of crossing is, are you making new work from the work, or are you just listening to something and working? Because if you're just listening and not commenting or like adding, then the argument of like copyright infringement's just like boom, that's going to drop on you pretty hard. So that's my understanding of it. But again, I'm no like expert in this, and I'm relatively new to the idea of doing commentary at all. But yeah, that's part of the reason, is like I can be pretty rambly, as you can see. Like I spent like 30 minutes, providing content without watching anything. So I can go that route, but I think it's like, to me, this is kind of fun because I feel like it enriches our brains while we're working on art, and we get to work on art together and kind of think through some like weird, deeper things. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. But I'm also very careful not to pick stuff that's like very clearly going to be a problem, so I think if you're talking about like things that are like royalty free, you might be okay. But again, like you probably want to make sure you're adding something to it, not just and adding like a substantial amount to it, not just playing it. Let's see here. Oh, we're at the hour mark, you guys. This is craziness. So I think that what we're gonna do here, excuse me, is I'm gonna go ahead and finish up flat coloring these picture frames in the background of panel 3, and then we'll play a trailer. Nice. I like the Wu-Tang quote there. Vic said, "Protect your neck." I like it. All right. Let's see here. All right. And what do we got? Okay. So we've had a really interesting stream thus far. Let's see here. And okay, I'm going to go ahead and make this magenta. And I'm just going to go ahead and save. And then what we're going to do is, so the magenta is the stuff that I haven't flat colored yet. So we have a good start. I'm going to go ahead and play a trailer. Yeah, and then Vic called out the East Coast. Nice. I can't fully support East Coast callouts because I am from the West Coast, but I am one of those guys who, like, if it comes to hip hop, I do kind of prefer the East Coast stuff. Although it's interesting because, like, I've mentioned him on multiple streams, but like Kendrick Lamar has like an East Coast feel to like his style and his experimentation and kind of like his more heady hip hop, but it's like super West Coast, which is crazy. It's kind of interesting where hip hop's evolved, where like the styles are really bleeding together, and so like you have kind of Atlanta sounds happening in different regions and stuff like that. It's kind of nice to see, actually. But the kind of core of what I like is like part of why I like Kendrick Lamar is I like the I tended to like, at least for the era of like Wu-Tang and stuff, I've always been like much more drawn to like the what was going on in the East Coast. And similar with punk rock, like my favorite punk rock is like DC sounds. I think the Washington DC punk scene was like the best there ever was. And all the modern punk I like tends to have like roots in a lot of that DC stuff. So anyhow, it's interesting. Yeah, Nas, MF Doom, yep, really good stuff. Yeah, okay. Let's take a break and watch the trailer for Jacob's Apartment, and then we'll come back. We'll finally get to watch this lecture on cognition. I promise we'll get some of it. And also get further on Not Death But Love, the strange supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. So hang in there. While there's a break, I noticed there's like 7 people watching. If you haven't, do me a favor, hit that like button. You, the person listening right now, that'll help. That helps immensely. And honestly, come on. We're making content here. Let's hit that like button. Okay, I'll be right back. And here's the Jacob's Apartment trailer. Wait a minute. You didn't hit like yet. Hit it? Okay, cool. All right. Here's the trailer. Speak clearly, it seems that only in dreams can we these things we've seen and walk around breathing I don't know the part to play in this heart of mine. There's dissonant things, they split at the seams. So something that is awesome too about this new mic that I'm going to totally ramble about for a second before we get into the lecture is it has a mute button. So like I can literally mute. I just muted, right? And like that's really cool to be able to do that rather than to have to go into StreamYard and hit mute. Especially like for artcasters, because artcasters, if I like have to cough, I have to hit mute, and I think on StreamYard it literally makes like a visible mute thing on the stream, and so that can come across as like really rude if I'm talking to somebody in a conversation and they see me mute the microphone. So it's just a much better thing for like interviews as well, and so hopefully that'll make our interviews a little more comfortable. Yeah, and also it keeps me up with the Joneses in the sense that like Scott Cirkland and Corey Kerr have like incredible audio quality on their stuff, and it's like, okay, visually I can be the like punk rock, I threw it all together thing, but like and like surprisingly, like the little upgrade I did a year ago just to have like better lighting, I think makes it visually a much more compelling kind of look for people. But like I definitely don't want to be like the one guy on Artcasters who's like, audio is just a drag to hear. I want it to be a pleasant experience for you guys. So, so I think that'll be really cool to be able to, like, again, I know it's nerdy, but just having a mute button is kind of cool. And the funny thing is, even the mic I got, it's not like this is like modern technology. This is, stuff that it's not top of the line. But for me, again, I'm a guy who I appreciate things. Like, I used to play Squires, for guitars, like really cheap, crappy Squires. Before Squire was where they're at now. Like, what's amazing is like the modern Squire guitars are like incredibly good, like shockingly good. Same with like the modern Epiphones are like. I actually even got an Epiphone really recently. That like I feel I like more than Gibson. Like, it's crazy. It's like a better Les Paul than like a bottom of the line Gibson, because it's the inspired by Gibson like 1959 recreation of like a Les Paul, and it's so cool. It's such a good guitar, and it's like I just can't imagine like an era back when I was a musician. It's like a $100 guitar sounded like just trash. Like you were lucky to get pickups, right? And so like and then maybe you'd get lucky at a pawn shop and come up with like an okay guitar. But like the lower line guitars now, like Squire for instance, there are Squires I've played that I like more than Fenders, which back in the day I'd just play those because it was the closest I could get, with on the budget, and then we'd like jack them up and like try to make them sound better. But oh, nice. Vic said, I'm gonna make like a tree and take a nap in a laundry basket. How does laundry I feel like washing machines? I've noticed on Philip Chandler's streams too, there's like this ongoing thread of washing machines. I feel like laundry, washers. I don't know, Vic, what is going on with all the laundry references whenever you appear? No, have a good nap, man. And good luck on your comic. I'm glad you're working on it, and continue, man. Like, you're at a really good point to really grow that skill, and you're starting it way earlier than I did, and that's really cool and inspiring to see. Because like I didn't really start. I mean, I drew all the time. I'd make comics, but I never really started taking it super seriously and trying to make a really good thing. For like, I think I started a little late for that. Not started comics, but just started actually like completing work at like a higher level. So it's cool to see you like inspired and plugging away at that stuff. Don't let the bastards get you down, and keep making stuff. Let's see here. Nice. Vic said mine's an Alf thing. This is homemaking. Nice. I like it. All right, guys. So let's listen to this lecture. I feel like this is really interesting so far, even though we've only heard the intro. But it's food for thought, and it's starting to generate some creative vibes and thoughts already. So I think we'll continue with it. So I'm going to just press play once I'm done making this flat color selection. I will also say there's like elements of the creative process where, listening to something would not work necessarily. But like, luckily, like flat coloring, dude, yeah, I could like listen to anything all day and comment on it and all sorts of stuff while flat coloring. Flat coloring is very like production oriented, right brain kind of activity.
His biography will break the spell check feature on your computer.
Okay.
Finally, my favorite from his recent passion for translation, you'll need to absorb this slowly. Ma mignonne, cutie pie, pretty dear, fairest friend, pitting human against computers in poetry translation, and guess who wins? Just think of what we could learn by examining Doug's brain with functional magnetic resonance imaging absolutely non-invasive for those of you who aren't hip to this. While he's pursuing a thought experiment about the relationship between art and music. Phrenology would never be the same afterward. I will close by noting that not only has he done some remarkably novel and intellectually challenging work in the world, he has also always been a gracious and kindly and humanistic guide for those who want to explore it. I'm happy to introduce Doug Hofstadter, Stanford BS in Mathematics, class of 1965, the College of Arts and Sciences Professor of Cognitive Science at Indiana University, as well as the director of the program I just described earlier under a different name. In his own biography, he thanks Indiana University, in some respects Stanford's institutional parent, for, quote, the fresh winds of freedom generously afforded him by his truly open-minded university.
Interesting.
His presidential lecture in the Humanities and Arts is entitled Analogy as the Core of Cognition. Please join me in welcoming Doug back to Stanford.
All right, everybody, let's clap. Let's make this happen. This is going to be interesting. I haven't watched this yet. Again, watched the documentary on this guy and was just curious to kind of check out a little more about him. And we're working on comics. I hope you guys are working on projects right now.
I guess I'm a little bit on the spot here after an introduction like that. It was, I have to say also, Don didn't mention that we used to do a little running together. He used to go up to the dish from the Hoover House. And I remember, well, I shouldn't say we used to, that suggests more than once. I joined him one time. I was a pretty good runner. In fact, I still run, and I just ran this evening. But it was hard to keep up with Don. In fact, I don't know if I did. And do you still run, Don? Well, I guess that's what happens to us all. Anyway, we've had a lot of experiences together of various sorts, and he certainly outdid himself in that wonderfully kind and broad introduction. When I was here as an undergraduate in the early 60s, I was very interested in understanding what the mind was. I think I'd always been interested in what minds did and what creativity was. And I had the experience of learning to program in the early 60s before, well, Stanford had one computer.
Okay, so it was like the 60s.
20, located in the basement of Encina. How many people here remember that? About one person. Well, anyway, I programmed that Burroughs 220, and then I went on to other programming. But the point is that I got interested in how language worked and certain rules for language, and I don't want to go into that very much. My model for producing sentences was amusing, and it had a lot of amusing things, but what it really inspired me to do was to think about what cognition is. It certainly was not a model of cognition, but it was an amusing attempt. And over the years, then, I devoted a great deal of my life to thinking about what cognition is. And I guess tonight I'm going to be telling you some of the important conclusions that I've come to, and I don't know if I can convince anybody, but I will do my best. I will begin with a sort of a complaint.
So let me pause here. Okay, so I think it's fascinating. Like, a lot of people don't always see like a connection between art or like, basically a lot of people don't connect practical, majors or like interests of study with the humanities. And and this can be a real problem because like it kind of leads to this idea of people being like, why go to college? I can just make money without college, right? And I think a lot of people forget that like there is this sense or this reality to like education at its best, where you're pursuing something even further than just like money. And I feel like in our society quite often, like everything gets broken down into money, and I get it because we all need money, right, to survive. And of course, everybody wants to have wealth or some kind of prosperity, like financially. I forget, but there's like this study where they realize like there's a specific cap of money that can kind of bring happiness. I think I can't remember what it is, but at least in the US, I think it was something around like once you're making above like 75K a year, something like that. Anything under that, like finances really create an effect on anyone kind of making under that, especially families making under that. It's just like a pressure that affects people's mental health. It affects their outgoing. And that's a pretty high number for a lot of artists, right? But like they've done studies that like once you kind of exceed that, like it kind of doesn't matter how much more you add, like your happiness doesn't increase much, which is really interesting considering, you have people who literally make like billions a year. They could spend like $1 million a day for the rest of their life and like not go broke. And yet like just the thought that like somebody in that situation might actually be is like not much happier than somebody making like, 75 grand is crazy. So, anyhow, my whole point in that rant is that like, I think especially for artists, the act of creating is kind of antithetical to consumerism. And yet you're making it for like, especially those of us who are making commercial art, like even comics, like even though I do indie underground comics and stuff, like they are made to be a product that's going to be bought and sold. Right. But I think that it's important to kind of keep an eye on that, like in your own expectations and desires for your career. Like, don't forget the whole pursuit of art. It's funny. I was reminded of one of my favorite painting teachers from when I was in undergrad today, because I was looking at Facebook, and one of his students got a tattoo of his catchphrase because he's a great professor. But when we were painting, he used to walk behind us like every day of class. The guy's name's Yuji. I think he still teaches at Cal State Long Beach. Amazing life oil painter. And so you'd be sitting there and you're kind of being like fragile or like, like dainty about your approach to painting, or like trying to smooth everything out, because everybody does that when they don't know how to oil paint. Like they'll just explore the fact that it's wet, and because it's wet on wet, a lot of non-oil painters think that you're supposed to just make gradients. Like just everything should be a gradient. And the more accomplished oil painters tend to like really play with like wet on wet as like flat, just big slabs of paint, and enjoying the pigment that comes from the wetness, the ability to scrape and stuff like that. But it should be a little more bold. And that, at least it's the method that Yuji used, where it's very bold. It's very like you're laying slabs of paint. You're kind of thinking about like, you don't even use like multiple brushes. You use like one big flat brush and you can get so much detail out of that with limitations. But anyhow, he'd have this phrase because like all of us are like trying to do, like, I don't know, can I get out the fan brush and make this all pretty? And like Yuji would just come up behind you and be like, be bold, be bold. That was his catchphrase, was be bold. And he kind of explained it a little more, as we got further into the semester. But one of the things I liked about it was it's kind of like an artist's approach to life. It's like you kind of need to be a little bold, and bold in like pursuing getting better, like not for financial gain, just for the pure art of it, like the craft of it, like the idea of like this rich history of master artists that have come before you, and like being able to like be bold like they were, and understanding that like you're part of this history, not like, we're not all going to be like, in the history books, but we should be proceeding making art, understanding there's more to art and there's more value to good art than just like $1. There are so many great pieces of artwork that it'd just be a shame if the person had given up because they weren't profitable in their lifetime, that have since like went on to like revolutionize fields and stuff like that. And the humanities are just like they're not going to be the big paying stuff. Like generally you're not going to make a lot of money in the humanities. They're not going to necessarily monetarily increase your net worth instantly. but they're so important for thinking. And then the ability to think and like even when it comes to concepting or business or anything like that, like a little philosophically is actually very advantageous, like monetarily as well. But it's important on its own to be able to like explore thought and figure out who you are as an individual and be a good citizen, like or a good like person, like to become whole. And that used to be a big idea in education, and there's a whole movement that's very trade based in education lately, especially a lot of like online learning and stuff, which is an excellent thing. But it's so important to remember that it's not just about acquiring skills. It's also about like thinking and like exploring thought and stuff like that. So anyhow, this is a long-winded way of saying it's very cool to hear that this Hofstadter guy had these varying interests and was sort of exploring the idea of thought and cognition. And it sounds like money and all of that stuff is like kind of a side thing to like a curiosity that he's chasing. And that's what I'm saying is like something we shouldn't disregard as artists is like to chase curiosity. I guess we'll tie it into the whole don't let the bastards get you down thing, but that's what I mean. Don't let people force you into like killing your curiosity, because your curiosity is going to lead you to better art and getting better at art and making better art. And curiosity is going to keep you making, whereas like, consumerism is going to kill your soul. I don't know if that makes sense. Not that we should all be anti-consumeristic. Like if you can make $1 doing art, you should like have a hustle, do all that. But yeah, the humanities are so important beyond just, there's so much more value. When people break down value of things just based on like dollars exchanged, it's like you miss out on like, why do people want to spend dollars on art? Like what does art do for people, right? And like some people like to make it really trite and say all art is for is entertainment, but it's not, right? Like we've all had experiences of art that's like just like a snapshot of beauty or of sorrow, and for some reason it's like I want to pay for it. Like it's a weird thing, and there's something deeper with art that kind of goes beyond money, I think, at its best. And so like I think it's important for us to keep that in mind, like when we're doing art. At least, I should stop saying us and just say for me it's really important. I never regret, it's funny, as like an undergrad, when I was working on my undergraduate stuff, I remember having resentment that I had to do like general ed courses, because I'd be like, man, can't I just get into art stuff, because I just want to get better at drawing. But like in retrospect, there was so much joy in the exploration that happened in those classes, where I had like classes on like the history of comedy, and we talked about like comedy dell'arte and like the whole history of comedy from like the foundations of like the earliest foundations of man. And it was amazing. It was like one of the coolest classes ever. And I cite it all the time, like in my life. And it's actually influenced my writing and my pacing and my timing. And it's like, I would have had no idea that would actually help me with comics, comic books, because I wasn't aiming to write funny comics, And anyhow, I'm just saying, like, the humanities, more power to them, and don't let people, don't let normies come along and make you think your only worth is money. That's just like, that's business people talk. And like, again, be a good business person as an artist, but don't shut off the art side, because the art side is going to make way better commercial art too.
Everything is in focus. Good, that's great. By the way, I don't use PowerPoint, for better or for worse. I don't know what that means, but so you'll have to put up with my handwriting.
Sorry, Adam, I got something on that tack. You said the earliest documented joke supposedly is a Sumerian joke about a guy's wife farting. Not only that, that is cool. Yes, and Okay, the Decameron. Oh man, if you want to read a book just full of like poop jokes and like sex jokes, like the Decameron, one of the oldest comedies we have, was literally just like, yeah, it was a lot of fecal matter jokes and sex jokes and like really inappropriate jokes. And this is like back when like I think the Decameron's like at the peak of the Catholic Church, like executing people for like, you know, drawing a hand wrong, like on a painting. And the book had like like saucy stories about nuns and like all sorts of stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of like very juicy, controversial comedy in the history of comedy. Because for some reason, you know, pooping, even though it's gross, has always been funny. It just has. Things like that have always been something people laugh at for some reason. Vic said, have you ever read String of Pearls, the Sweeney Todd book? That I have not. I have not read that. I'm sure it would be cool, though. Okay, let's continue.
Writing and with sloppiness and things like that. And so in cognitive science, the cognitive science conferences and journals and so forth, they divide cognition up into all sorts of different pieces. And one of the pieces is always called analogical reasoning. And it's usually put together with problem solving.
It's going to get into problem solving.
It's
this
sort
is
of one
interesting.
little teeny part of thinking. And I sort of decided that I would put it this way, that analogical reasoning, they sort of is the Delaware of cognition.
The Delaware of cognition.
So I kind of feel that shunts it off a little bit. It doesn't make it very central. Now, you might think that Indiana would be a better name for analogical reasoning, but I'm going to be a little bit more daring than that. And it doesn't mean California either, or Texas, or Alaska. First of all, we're going to get rid of the word reasoning. I don't want reasoning. Analogy has nothing to do with reasoning, or it does a little bit, but not much. I mean, it's just a misnomer, and it's a misconception of what analogy is. And that's what I really want you to understand. And I suppose...
Oh, it's going to talk about analogy. That's awesome.
If we are going to make any connection between analogy and a geographical situation, we're going to liken it to the interstate freeway system. And it links everything together. Analogy is the interstate freeway system of cognition. It is not one little tiny zone somewhere off in the side. So that's a kind of a way of that I think about it. I mean, I don't really usually think about it that way. I made that up yesterday. So, but
he's using analogy to explain analogy. I like it.
So, one of my rules, which I'm sure I will disobey tonight, is don't cover your transparencies. Let everybody see everything. But I may not do that. We'll see if I'm true to my own principles. So, as it says here, I think of categorization. I mean, the story about analogy making.
Thomas Adams said, I think the really good liberal arts classes really help with communication. I agree. Like, you'd be surprised how much like your emails are so much better. The other thing is it helps your comprehension. Like, you know, like taking having the experience of like sitting through lectures and dealing with hard to grapple with concepts, even concepts you disagree with, is like so valuable for learning how to like actually be able to understand what's being said. It is kind of similar to like exposing yourself. Like, let's say you move to a different country that speaks a totally different language than your primary language. You're probably going to get inundated with the new language a lot quicker than somebody who's like, you know, not a visitor there. And it's kind of similar. Like there's a heavier language that academics use, and I don't always indulge in it, but I can somewhat comprehend it. And particularly because of my experience with going to college and expanding my mind a little bit. And I don't mean expand my mind in like the hippie, like, you know, way of, you know, take these drugs and expand your mind or something. I just mean it in the way of like, just like exercising parts of your brain that you don't have to use on a daily basis. And also doing it for the enrichment of your mind, not the enrichment of your pocketbook. Um, and it does come down to values, right? Because some people think that's all there is to life is just like make a ton of money, and that'll lead to happiness. But that gets really brought into question when it comes to things like, do you think having families important? Do you think having a romantic relationship's important? Like those things have a lot more to them than money. And so like, and I know tons of people, well, I shouldn't say tons, but the very wealthy people I know, and that I've come across, like a lot of them are not very happy people. Like, in fact, a lot of them struggle a lot more with like mental health stuff than I do. And that's always been a shock to me, but it's just a reality of life. Like it's a trope, but it's like money doesn't bring happiness. Neither does enriching your mind, right? But life isn't always about happiness. It's about kind of the experience of figuring out your own philosophy and your own purpose and your own core reasoning, and being able to grapple with hard ideas to expand what you're capable of finding when it comes to like meaning, right? It's just really important. It might be the most important thing you can do. So when people like besmirch the humanities, and especially like with funding, right? Like there's always these pushes to be like, oh, we need to just get rid of the liberal arts and just fund only STEM. And I'm glad there's a movement um, in STEM where they're starting to make it STEAM to include the arts, because that's a really good move. Because keeping it STEM, where it's just like we're only going to focus our heavy hitters on like engineering and stuff like that, it just shuts off the ability for somebody like this Hofstadter guy, who seems like he's made a really big contributions in the realm of like practical sciences too, from also being able to expand, because of the fact that like as you can see and you'll see in this lecture, it's like he's got various interests, and some of them are the humanities, and the humanities interests and the philosophical start tying into the practical. And it's kind of like a cool overlap that you couldn't have happen if you shut off the humanities at like schools. And by the way, that's not knocking STEM, that's just saying like, that's not the only thing. Vic said, making a ton of money only to die and lose it after not enjoying your life, given all the work, sounds stupid as hell. Yeah. And the thing is like, maybe there's better things to struggle over, like it's a weird thing, but I'd rather be, obviously I want to be fed and stuff like that, but I would rather make a great piece of art that doesn't do great than a crappy piece of art that sells a bunch of money. Like, and makes me just like incredibly wealthy. As fun as it would be to have like a bunch of throwaway cash, for me, ethically and just personally, I would still, to this day, prefer to be the person making really great art with my time and efforts, outside of that base level stuff. Like the base level stuff, yeah, like you need housing. If you have a family, you need to provide for your family. There's like basic core things, but once those core things are kind of taken care of, I want the extra resources spent to try to make something great. Okay, let's continue.
Of course, has to be a little bit more than just analogy making. So I want to sort of show you how things fit together. Categorization is the name of the cognition game, but analogy is the mechanism that creates or that allows categorization to happen. By categorization, I mean deciding what something is, what the essence of something is. So now one could sort of summarize this in a corny little analogy. Again, analogy is the motor of the car of thought. And then we can even write it down as this little thing. Analogy is to thinking as a motor is to a car. A is to B as C is to D. And this sort of reduces it down to the old standard, A is to B, C is to D. Proportional analogy looks like a fraction. And that's very nice. And it's the kind of thing, like shoe is to foot as glove is to hand, and these kinds of things that maybe they put on IQ tests and SATs and things like that. But that's not how I think of analogy either. I mean, that's again putting it into a little tiny box and saying that all of analogy is A is to B as C is to D, and again it misses the point. So I don't know. I can't define anything, and I kind of hate definitions, but I will at least sort of give you a sense. Analogy making is the perception of common essence between two things, and then a couple of footnotes to sort of hedge. I mean, things don't have essences, but what
let's
I
pause.
mean.
This is super interesting, and I am super engaged in this. But Vic mentioned you were just mentioning. Anyhow, you were mentioning you're a fan of reggae, and I'm not like a big like. I have to admit, just I have to feign pretty much total ignorance about modern reggae. But I gotta say, man, Toots and the Maytals is probably this year and last year. I mean, I've been into them for a long time, but for some reason that's been in rotation, like just like nonstop this year. I've been so into Toots and the Maytals. Like it's shocking how good that band is. And like the stuff they were doing, it's just like there's just not a lot of bands that good. And it's shocking. It's shocking, like just listening to it, where it's like, oh my gosh, like they were so innovative and so badass. So anyhow, just throwing that out there. Oh, nice. Okay, I'll check out Chronics. That sounds awesome. Okay, let's continue.
I'm not I'm not talking about some kind of abstract, glowing philosophical essence. I'm talking about the essence that you perceive at the particular time in the frame of mind that you happen to be in. And when I say things, it's tempting to think that the analogies are between the things in the external world, but I really want to say that analogies happen inside your head, so that they're connections between two mental representations. They're connections between things inside your head, which we project to the outside world, and we say these things out there are analogous, and that's very reasonable to do. But I wanted to emphasize how they go on inside the head, and they are between mental representations. Now, I want to give you a couple of analogies, some of my favorite analogies. They're all, analogies.
Let's pause this for a second. Yeah, that's a good point. Adam was saying Hofstadter had a warm, inviting demeanor for sure. Like, so that's one of the things I also, I was joking at the beginning of this, that we're going to listen to Stanford lectures, right? But like, I have to actually say, one of the great things, I'll give this tip for anybody who wants to listen to really interesting stuff when you're working on art. There is a whole series on Audible called the Great Courses series, where you can access like lectures at like some of the greatest universities known to man. And you can do like a whole semester's worth of a course just in lectures. And they're so enriching and cool. And like if you have Audible or something like that, I'm not hustling an Audible thing, but I have a subscription to that. But like I love the Great Courses series for that, because like you get to listen to these great minds lecture at like some of the highest institutions that exist on any topic, and it's really cool. But there's this misperception quite often that like academia is very snobby and stuff like that, and there's a bit of snobbery, and there's definitely a bit of that South Park like smugginess. But what's shocking is actually a lot of the greater minds, like we watched like a John Lennox thing a while ago, that's an Oxford mathematician, one of the most inviting, easy to understand lecturers you'll ever listen to. Hofstadter, again, like pretty brilliant mind, Stanford, and yet like here I'm watching a lecture and it's like he's boiling things down in a very easily explained, and not that his concepts are easy, but he's very careful to kind of like keep it digestible for people. and that's a talent, and that's something to really admire. Like that, a mind that's done a lot of innovation can boil down their complicated ideas into something that you can follow. That's cool. It's a hard thing to do.
A few that I think are very interesting and kind of provocative. So I'll begin with when I was a kid. I was 8 years old, as I recall, when I found out about exponents. And I was in love with math, and I was fascinated with any new mathematical concept. And I made tables of integers to various powers.
So let's pause. Vic was saying, have you ever thought about having a Will Eisner interview in place of a lecture? 100%. Like with the content, like again, I haven't done commentary on my live stream for that long. This is something I've just started integrating a little bit on some nights, when I don't particularly I'm more in the mood to like draw and kind of think and comment. And yeah, I mean, this like so far the commentaries kind of run the gamut, where I went on like a little flat earth arc where I was watching flat earthers do debates. And then I've been like kind of doing debate sphere stuff. And I'm sure at some point there will definitely be some cartoonist stuff. We did watch a thing with Chris Ware that was really interesting, where it was a brief spotlight on Chris Ware, and was pretty inspiring. And so, yeah, I'm pretty open to adding some cartooning stuff to the palette. However, I also want to say this, kind of like I was talking about with the liberal arts or whatever, especially when I'm working on things, sometimes it's really inspiring and helpful for me to listen to like industry stuff and kind of deep dive into the history of comics, because there's such a rich, cool history of it. But sometimes, like, I feel like my art gets better, or like my mind gets better for my art by looking at other sources than just comics. Like, my comics get better from like looking at like books, my compositions get a little better sometimes by looking at film rather than just comics. And so, not saying that I won't, I'm just saying like, currently I'm kind of in the vibe of this like philosophical thing. And then we'll see where it goes. But yesterday we were checking out neutrinos, so who knows? But I'll definitely keep that in mind, because there's some amazing stuff. It'd be interesting to kind of do some Winsor McKay deep dive stuff too. Okay, let's continue.
I filled notebooks with these kinds of things. So one day I was walking through the house.
Vic said, I love flat earthers, like watching a living train wreck. You just can't look away. Totally. And I think there will be some commentary that's like that, where I'm like, I don't know, today I feel like drawing some pictures and listening to train wrecks. Okay, let's continue.
And I saw a paper that my dad was reading, and he was a physicist, and it had math notation galore, and I couldn't make head or tail of it. But what I did notice was that there was there are little things that said, like x sub 1, x sub 2, and stuff like that. And I thought, ooh, look at that, these little subscripts. So here's my little transparency. The red, you can get the idea that I saw that my guess was, what in the world, what operation on numbers does this subscripting thing do? If the superscripting thing, puts it to a power, what does the subscripting do? I was really interested. And my dad told me, he said, oh, that doesn't do anything. It's just the way of naming variables. And I was so disappointed, completely flattened. Okay. Fast forward 40 years. Now I'm a father of a 1-year-old daughter named Monica, and Monica is sitting in our playroom pushing the button of the dust buster, having time of her life. And then what does she see? She sees another button. And she pushes it and nothing happens. And I'm watching her, and I go over there I'm sitting, on the floor, and I get up and I go over next to Monica, and I push the button and I open it up and I show her, this is just where the garbage is, And Monica's, of course, completely destroyed. And at that moment, you have to understand, I hadn't thought about this thing with my dad for probably 40 years. At that moment, the whole thing of the exponents and the subscripts comes rushing to my head. And
He's also a good
and I want you to-
storyteller
I
so
just
far.
want,
That's one thing I'm
kind of
noticing
spell
too.
out this analogy. It's a pretty complicated one. I mean, somebody said to me, I guess it was Don today, he said, oh, people make the mistake of reading out loud their transparencies. So I don't know. I don't know if I can avoid reading this out loud, though, because it's kind of fun. But I've already told it to you, so maybe I won't. I mean, I think it's interesting, though, that if you I mean, here is me and all my love of mathematics and the subscripts. And this is an interesting line here because I make an analogy. Part of this analogy is an analogy. I make an analogy between superscripts and subscripts. And I think, there's something there. And then I get flattened by my father. Okay, and so here's Monica, and she comes along and she makes an analogy between one button and another. And she's hoping, and then she gets flattened by her father, who happens to be me, but that's just a coincidence. But anyway, there you go. I mean, it's a pretty complicated analogy. Now, the next one, that one is what you might call a reminding event. And a lot of analogies are reminding events. And I want to say something.
Okay, so that's really cool. I'm already pretty intrigued by this because I like that it's going like a level deeper. So he's using analogies to talk about analogy and make analogies about analogies. And it's getting really deep, like in an interesting way, where I think through his lecture so far, he's showing kind of like how powerful analogy is for cognitive reasoning, and not doing it by saying it's important, but by like actually displaying it with multiple analogies and events of analogies, and how like meaningful those are for people when they're cognitively like processing or developing and continuing in life. That's really man, the way he's doing that is just kind of brilliant. And really, yeah, you're right. Adam was saying he gets very meta, which I love. Yeah, and I like that it's hard to get meta and have it be comprehensible. And yet I'm following him on the rabbit trail and I haven't lost it yet, which is really again, like that's a man, hats off. Yeah, he's a really good lecturer so far. I'm very intrigued and I'm curious where this is going to go. But yeah, thanks, Adam, for turning me on to the creator of the brain in a vat, which is not a small accomplishment. That is, he literally created that story. So that conundrum. So cool. Okay, let us continue. And in our vats as we listen. Okay.
Immediately, which is that a lot of people think analogies are there to serve purposes. They're not there to serve purposes at all. They just happen. That's all. There's no purpose. There's no purpose at all. They just happen. Sure, they're in a certain sense, they're serving evolution, but that's about the only purpose that there is, you think. I want to give you an analogy that occurred to me a few months ago. I was reading a book that my mother had loaned me by Jonathan Raban called, I don't remember exactly, something about Voyage to America or Discovering America or something. Anyway, he's traveling across, his first chapter, he's traveling across the Atlantic Ocean. I was in an airplane. I was flying back from California to Indiana, and we were flying on our first leg. We were going to Denver, and which is perhaps a United hub, I don't know. Anyway, we were going to Denver, and so I was reading this first chapter in which Jonathan Raban goes from England, from Liverpool to somewhere in Canada, and he was in a boat called the Atlantic Conveyor, and he was very impressed by the size of this boat, thought that surely nothing could rock it, but the captain told him, no, it's a boat is very vulnerable. And then, what do you know, but they discovered a hurricane that was, in their pathway, or it was actually coming up the Atlantic, and it was going to be right in their way. And so, well, I mean, not very complicated thinking, but here's what they did. There's the Atlantic conveyor, and there's Hurricane Helene. And I've drawn this a little bit off because I don't know if they went quite that far south, but I didn't want to put in time and everything. You get the basic idea here. I mean, the hurricane went up, and they went to the south. They deviated a little bit and missed it, and then went up and then turned back up. Okay, so I've just read this thing. Well, I'm thinking about the Atlantic Ocean and this big hurricane, which was, curiously enough, called a whirly-girl by the captain.
A whirly-girl is a really weird name for a hurricane.
It's just part of the first chapter. It's not a major part of the first chapter. It's just something that happens. The first chapter is all about this trip across the Atlantic and so forth and so on. And then I get out at Denver, and I'm walking down the corridor, and as one does in airports, and here's a picture of me, and this is a woman with a suitcase, and she's crossing the corridor, and I swerved a little bit to the left, and all of a sudden, bang! I thought, hey, I'm the boat, she's the hurricane, or if you wish, the whirly-girl. And this corridor is the Atlantic Ocean. And 2 seconds is 2 days, or whatever it may be. And now I have to explain to you also, this event inside my head happened so quickly and so fleetingly that I would not have even noticed it if I weren't kind of an inveterate observer of my own thinking. I mean, I caught it, it would have disappeared in a flash, and to leave no effect on the world at all. But here it is, leaving an effect on all of you now. My point is, analogies happen all the time for no purpose. They're fleeting. They're transient. They just appear and go away. Okay? Your mind is filled with them. Now, to get the poster that was made used these two photographs, which were taken at my parents' ranch back in the 80s, I believe. Now, various people may have thought various things about them, and I'm just going to tell you what is here. The upper one is in the summer, and there's this lovely oak tree that I know very, very well, casting its shadow under the noonday sun.
Let's pause here. So I've been drawing for a good 2 hours now. Well, not really drawing, but coloring my page. And it's page 73 of Not Death But Love, The Strange Supernatural Story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. I plan on chugging it through and just finishing this page. The cool thing is, I'll show you the progress so far. What's kind of rad is these first 4 are done. And the neat thing is the one we just completed was the most complicated one. The other 2 should go relatively quickly, which is very exciting. So I hope you guys will stick around and hang out with me. If you're watching, I'll ask that you hit the like button if you haven't yet. Go ahead and do that. And we're going to play another trailer. And in this case, I think we'll do... I really love the word Zoid. I mean, this was just one of the most flattering things. My friend Jim Lujan, the animator, the indie animator you should all be subscribed to, made a commercial for my channel and animated it. It's called Wordzoid, and it's literally one of my favorite things and one of the most flattering things somebody's done for me. And so I want to play that. And then I think I do want to rock the Joe Biden endorsement after that, because I haven't played that one in a while. But we'll play that maybe at our next break, because Adam rocked that as well. So here is Wordzoid. I'll be right back, and then we will continue kind of commenting on this lecture as well as working on graphic novels and art together. So, okay. Here is the Wordzoid trailer. And again, if you guys notice any audio issues, especially on this mic, let me know. I'll try to kind of dial it in, but I do feel like this was an upgrade. Okay, here we go, and I'll be right back.
Well, Peter, since I'm such a big music fan, I'm going to have to go with Karen Carpenter. Oh, Stu, I'm sorry. That's the incorrect answer. Trish, what you got for us?
I'm gonna go with Kim Gordon.
All right, let's check that answer. Kim Gordon. Do we have a Kim Gordon? Yes, and that means you're our new Wordzoid champion, Trish. Dale, tell Trish what she's won. Trish, you've won a copy of 2 stories, a memoir of faith and mental illness. Handwritten, hand-drawn, and handed to you by artist and writer Joshua Kemble. But wait, that's not all. You've also won a copy of Jacob's Apartment, the story of a doomed romance. What happens when you take Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and put it in a blender with Ghost World? You get Jacob's Apartment, written and illustrated by Joshua Kemble. Trish, thank you for playing Wordzoid.
All right, great job, Trish.
I was told I was gonna get a lifetime supply of paper towels.
So, okay, before we get back into the lecture, I want to have a braggy dad moment. My son is really smart, and like it's been really fun to watch his progress, like kind of growing as he is growing up. But like it was literally like last week, he ended up like taking this test for GATE, which is like the gifted learning program at school, and like it's like one of those things where they take this test and they're kind of ranked with like the minds of people that age, and he ended up like testing in the top 2% of the entire population of kids his age in our country. And I was like, in like every subject. And I was like, holy crap. It's pretty cool. So, you know, I've been pretty open about the fact that my son's autistic. I suspect that I probably have autism as well. And so that's just like a really encouraging thing to see that it hasn't kind of held him back in any way. And that it's almost like for him been like almost like a superpower. And it's such a big part of I mean, he's just a great kid, but like, I just was thinking about that because I'm watching a Stanford lecture and I'm realizing that my son very well, I mean, like, I don't know if he's going to go to Stanford. I mean, I'm going to support whatever he wants to do in life, but it's cool that he's going to be able to take some programs this early on and some specialized schooling that will help him to have more options, especially in the realm of like, you know, he's really good at math. And so, you know, maybe being able to get him, you know, like he's somebody, he would probably really enjoy like coding. And so the idea that he could actually start studying like computer coding and things like really heavy things this early on that are fun for him. And again, like math was never fun for me. That's one area where we aren't super similar. But like it's super fascinating to him and he loves, I mean, he kind of hates math, but he hates like the boring stuff, but he likes playing with math. And so I think, it's going to be really cool to see that development, but it's also funny because the way he's describing the chain of thoughts is a very like Aspie, like autistic kind of process. And, you know, it's one of the reasons I suspect I might have it too is you'll see when I talk on these streams, and I've been complimented for it. Again, a blessing and a curse. Some of my artist friends have been like, how do you just kind of talk for like 2 hours on a topic, like during a stream? And again, like, I don't know if you guys enjoy it, but I've had friends like reach out to me and be like, I can't do that. It's bizarre, you know, like just to fill time with like your mind and like what you're doing while you're drawing. And it's like, you know, like the thing is, for me, you know, like a lot of what he was just describing, that kind of chain of connection and analogy, that happens verbally and mentally at the same time. Like I'm not quite often pre-thinking things. I'm finding connections and kind of thinking through things as I'm talking. And so like, it's kind of fun. And I don't know, in a weird way, like comforting to hear somebody describing that kind of chain of thinking at like an airport, because I'm like, I think it's a more human experience than I acknowledge. Like sometimes I can feel like, oh, this is probably like a weird, like non-normative thing. And it's like, no, actually, I mean, like a lot of us, like a lot of us have these threads of thought where you're like, you know, you see a red dress or something, and then you connect it with like a red thing you saw the day before, and it starts leading you down these chains. It's kind of neat that's, I mean, that's very like, if you took that and accelerated it to an extent and got a little obsessive with it, then that becomes a little more of the autistic side of that chain. But it's nice to think that whole thing is like beyond just like a non-neurotypical thing, like that there's also probably like a neurotypical aspect of that as well, of just like we just think in chains and connections, and that's encouraging because again, like, you know, I don't know. Anyhow, I just wanted to mention that because it was a like, speaking of analogies and how our brains think of analogies, I'm thinking of his analogy and it made me think of an analogy. Wow. Adam, this guy is really interesting. Like, and he is kind of meta, and it's fun because it does engage like the meta thinking in your own brain. Very cool. Vic said, I remember when I was considered a gifted kid, I got put in special classes and took me and look at me now drawing comics 90% of my life with a lack of education. You know, education's a life thing. Like, it's not just, you know, institutionalized. Like, you just kind of have to like pursue interests and stuff like that. And it's like, Vic, you're also like way young. Like, it's not, I don't think that's like a death sentence, you know, meaning like, yeah, I mean, dude, yeah, you can get educated. It's not a problem. And again, like, you know, like education doesn't only happen in institutions, but I think pursuing knowledge is really huge. Adam said, Douglas Hofstadter is great. His book, I Am Strange Loop, is one of my all-time favorite life-changing books. That's cool. I'm going to probably get it on Audible. Okay, let's continue.
The lower one is in the winter, and there is no sun at all. It's a cloudy day. What is that pattern, that dark thing under? That is
also, I'm sorry, he looks a lot like Rick Ocasek mixed with Andy Warhol. Like, if Rick Ocasek from the Cars, like, had a kid with Andy Warhol, that's that's Douglas Hofstadter. You know what I mean? You see what I'm talking about? Like, real quickly, look up a picture of Andy Warhol, and then look up a picture of Rick Ocasek, and then look at Douglas Hofstadter. If we're drawing analogies here, I'm just saying. Okay, let's continue.
Snow shadow, if you wish. That is the absence of snow. The snow has fallen, but it didn't go through the tree. It got caught by the tree, and so no snow is on the ground. And that dark patch is the absence of snow. And it's a kind of
he does have a David Byrne vibe
of a shadow. You know, to me, it was just a sort of a trivial connection, but it joined in many other kinds of shadows that I've thought about over the course of my life. I mean, I know that in Eastern Oregon and maybe other places, there is what they call a rain shadow.
He looks like a sitcom dad, was what Vic
to the east of the Cascade Mountains for some 100 or 200 or some miles, there's a desert. In other words, the Cascade Mountains basically stop the clouds from moving.
Sorry, let's pause here because David Byrne was brought up. I could totally imagine reading a Hofstadter book and putting on like My Life Among the Bush of Ghosts or whatever, and like just rocking out. Like it's funny, but like even not just like visually, but there's like an aesthetic to the way he's lecturing and a David Byrne like musical production. It's interesting. That is an interesting connection.
And so there's no rain to the east of the Cascades, and that's called a rain shadow. And there are all sorts of other kinds of shadows that I'm not going to go into. Shadow is a very common metaphor, people being in the shadow of their parents or in the shadow of World War II and so forth and so on. But I wanted to just make a curious little analogy that may be a new insight into the world, which is that, well, firstly, this idea that we're expanding the word shadow. We're expanding the word shadow. That in itself is part of what I wanted to tell you, that by seeing new instances of shadow, we're expanding our sense of what the word shadow means. This happens to be maybe my personal sense as opposed to a public sense, but it's no less valid. But I wanted to say that we could look at the picture of snow and maybe deduce something about light. We know that snow is made out of flakes, and we might just guess that because there's an analogy between light and snow, maybe light is made out of flakes. It's kind of a crazy idea, but we'll call it the light flake hypothesis. I suppose it is a fairly light and flaky hypothesis. But Hofstadter, 2005. Maybe we'll come back to that. Another shadow. This is one of my favorites, and we'll stop shadows at that point. I was talking with a friend who's Italian, and his brother is a professor at some university in northern Norway. And I said, "Oh my God, it must be awfully cold up there." And he said, "No, actually, it's pretty warm." And I said, "How can that be?" And he said, "Well, you know, the Gulf Stream is warm." And I said, "Yeah, but you know, it's very far north." He said, "Yeah, but it goes north." And I said, "But he says the interesting thing is that where it's cold is southern Norway." And I said, "How is that?" He said, "Because the Gulf Stream is blocked by England." And so I had this picture in my mind. I don't know if you can see the Gulf Stream, which is supposed to be red here, and it gets blocked by England. And so the shadow of England is on the coast of southern Norway, and the Gulf Stream hits the upper part of Norway. So we have a shadow thrown by England of the Gulf Stream. So it's, again, a wonderful abstraction of shadow. This is the kind of thing that analogy does to our concepts. Now, so here is just, you know, this simple idea that repeated analogies expand concepts. I've taken as the concept of number here, and I'm not going to go into it in any detail. I just simply want to say that anybody who's done any math knows that we begin with the positive integers. We learn to count. Then we learn about things like a half and a quarter and so forth. And eventually we learn about zero and the negative numbers. And then after many, and all of these are analogies. These are all generalizations that are made through analogy. And as we progress and go further and further, we get more and more abstract. And so I've indicated some things here, e and pi and e to the I pi and aleph.
Sorry, this is so fascinating because it is kind of fun that like, oh my gosh, okay. I wonder if this is where he's heading, because one of the things that I love about mathematics, even though like I'm not good at mathematics, the prospect that there is certainty in a lot of mathematical principles, and yet they're analogies. And this is something I've thought about. I don't know if I use the word analogy, but the idea that an abstract idea of like delineating what a number is or what a measurement is, and then setting it as a standard that didn't exist. It's an imaginary standard of like an inch, like the length of an inch, making a ruler. It's like an arbitrary guideline, kind of like making a comic. Like, so, you know, when you're making art, like often people suffer with like the blank page thing, right? Vic was saying Josh is having this intelligent stream of thought and we're talking about Alf. Yeah, but you got to remember, I kind of started this whole live stream with a your mom joke, so don't worry, I'm not above it, man. Honestly, we're all over the place. That's half the fun of it. I feel like so with like art, for instance, like you kind of start with an abstraction, like a blank page, and then you start creating guidelines for yourself, like especially when you're creating a story, right? Where you create these arbitrary guidelines, like a structure, And the structure is kind of an imaginary structure, but from that imaginary structure, something solid and substantial comes from it. And what's interesting to me, has always been interesting to me about mathematics, even though I'm not good at mathematics, is the idea that it is very much like art, where it starts as an abstraction and just kind of stating something, and setting up guidelines and parameters that are somewhat imaginary, and yet once they're stated, they become real. And like real enough to, split an atom, real enough to send a spaceship, out of the Earth's orbit and navigate it back to Earth after traveling to a different planet. Like, and yet these things all start as like these abstract imaginary things, or like he was saying, like an analogy. And I think that's, I hope that's where he's going, but like that's always been really fascinating to me. Just that fact, like how is a ruler, like once stated, an inch never shifts. So you're starting with something that's somewhat imaginary, and it's like a parameter. It's like that weird idea that I think Adam and I have talked about this before, but there's this like idea of, I think it's a Plato thing. I might be misremembering it, but the idea of like the greater realm of truth, where you're kind of accessing like a truth that's existed, and it kind of exists in this world of this gray slippery world of concepts, that are like, and it's scientific discoveries, mathematical discoveries, philosophical discoveries. They call them discoveries because you're not creating the truth that you've managed to catch from this. Like once you create addition, it's not like you actually create addition. Additions just existed before we knew how to kind of verbalize it and measure it. But like once you kind of come up with an arbitrary way of measuring, these things can become absolutes. And they always were absolutes. It's like this really just bizarre thing. And I think that's really fun, and interesting, and also a little mind warpy to consider. So I'm really excited that he's going to go into that. We'll continue.
Sub omega, different kinds of infinities, and I could include matrices in there, and on and on. And so we have all sorts of numbers, and it could keep on going. Concepts expand over our lifetime, and they expand for each one of us, and they expand for our culture. One of the key points that I want to make here, though, is that although concepts expand by seeing new instances, sometimes we have a concept that has only got one instance. But even there, it starts to spread and leak. So let's talk about that a little bit. The basic idea here is there is no fundamental difference between a single memory trace and a category, by which I mean a concept, no difference, category, concept, same thing. Okay, that's a very important idea of this talk, and I'm just going to give you a thing I call pluralization. So I'll read these out loud because I think that they're amusing. So there may be 2 or 3 young Einsteins among us tonight. Okay, what is a young Einstein? That's a pluralization of Einstein.
It's a rad movie.
Milton Babbitt is no Mozart, if you happen to know who Milton Babbitt is. If another Chopin was born in Lompoc, what would happen? It's the next Catcher in the Rye, or the Soviet Union's Vietnam, the Paris of the Middle East, which was once the name of Beirut. Someplace can be, actually I once heard Jerusalem being described as a Mecca for tourists. A bunch of treacherous quislings. Notice I've gone to the lowercase here. Mecca with lowercase, even though it comes from originally one thing, it gets pluralized. And Quisling was a Norwegian foreign minister or prime minister or something who I think collaborated with the Nazis. I don't remember the details. But it became a lowercase word for basically a traitor. And then Galileo, I don't know the details of this, but I have to assume that it was Galileo who actually used the word luna in the plural and with a lowercase m. In other words, talking about what he saw. he equated our moon with those things, those dots that he saw through his telescope, and called those moons. That was a magnificent leap that pluralized something that nobody had ever considered to be other than one unique thing in the world. So pluralization is a way in which a single entity becomes a wide category. And there really is no difference between a single entity and a category. Okay, so I guess I'm just saying this again. There's no fundamental difference between seeing something as a category member and seeing something as analogous to something else. In one case, something evokes a concept which has one instance, and in another case, something evokes a concept which has many instances and which has blurred together. Now, we come to another very special thing about human minds. Our minds are constructed, this is not new to anybody, that with an...
So Vic was saying an absolute can be completely unknown and only be acknowledged as legitimate, then be treated as someone's creation while simply being a constant in the universe. Trippy. Yeah, like that's roughly, yeah. That's a good point. It's kind of
unlimited quality for chunking. By that, what I mean is that primordial concepts in some interrelationship become a larger unit, a larger conceptual unit, like a family or something like that. And then a family can get incorporated into something larger. And we build our concepts by taking several concepts, putting them together, putting a membrane around them, and then sort of miraculously, the internal components sort of disappear. And we're left with just this new concept, which is kind of like a black box. We don't think so much about these things become semi-visible. They're sort of lurking in the background.
So this is actually a pretty good breakdown of just categorization. Like, one of the things that frustrates me with people who are kind of like super anti-science is like, I feel like they will forget that like I've heard some debates before of people who aren't super, like, again, I'm not super knowledgeable of science of science, but like I've heard debates before where especially when somebody's talking about like family trees or something like that in regards to like the science textbooks and stuff, they'll kind of use those as like a debunking point and just bypass the way that those originate and like the actual meaning of like categorizations and why we do that. And it's really a matter of like communicating and, like he was saying, like kind of boiling down a bunch of random things into easier to categorize like groups. So and I'm not going to be able to explain it as eloquently as is being here, but it's like it is like a huge part of science that most scientists are aware of. Like, even the imaginary numbers thing and like the fact that like the whole inch thing I was talking about, the first person I heard make that observation about an inch once stated never shifting that I knew is like a friend of mine who teaches mathematics at an institution. And they were talking about the creativity of mathematics to me because I was like just like bizarrely I've always been mystified. She's a person I've known since she was in like high school, and I've always been mystified by why she gets so excited about mathematics, just in practice, because it can be such drudgery. And that was like one of the cases that she brought up. So it's weird when people like will then talk to like a mathematician and be like, no, but like an inch, that's a solid thing. And it's like, no, it is, but like you're misunderstanding that an inch didn't exist. Like mathematicians came up with an inch. And then the inch once stated kind of became an absolute, but it's not as like, it's more shaky than people realize. And like, it becomes frustrating, I think, when people aren't aware of that, because they want to hold science to standards that science developed in order to do science, which is effective and does have like results, like tangible results that are beneficial for humanity, sometimes destructive for humanity too, right? But like it's one of those things of like seeing the way that people responded to like in real time seeing a vaccine develop. I don't want to get controversial with that because I know there's people who think that it's not effective. And I also, while not wanting to like offend or make controversial things for people, I just like, it's just blatantly stupid to ignore the history of vaccines and their effectiveness in preventing us from just getting annihilated and wiped out. Like, if you look back in like even the 20s, just like there's so many accounts of people just dying of like stupid things that had they been vaccinated, they just like would have had like been sick for like a day and been like, I'm good, but it's like, these things were like serious diseases that we as just humans through the activity of science, like, and vaccination, like have managed to overcome. And to, in my lifetime, experience people who are holding science to like this weird standard when it's real-time science. So they'd be like, why did the guidelines change? Why did these things change? And it's like, they don't understand that like, this isn't, it's like on one hand, they want to claim that it's bunk and that it's not going to have results and that it's like this big conspiracy or whatever. And on the same other hand, they want to hold it to like this rigid standard that science literally can't be held to in real time, because science literally only develops through peer review, through scrutiny, and through time. And so it's like this weird thing where you're like asking for absolutes and also wiggle room, and you're asking like the wrong things, like where there's more absolutes in the areas where people think it's wiggly, and because there's data and there's time and there's like peer review and correction and revision, like but like the development of mRNA is not like this brand new thing. Like this is a huge innovation that has helped us like exponentially, and had a lot to do with like the decoding of the human genome and all of these movements that have happened genetically like in the last few years. But like hearing people like grown adults who like on one hand like misunderstand biology to the level that they think that a mRNA, not just a fake one but a real mRNA, would be able to somehow invade the nucleus of a cell, which is that just cannot happen. That cannot happen. Like that's basic biology. Like you cannot have an mRNA invade the nucleus of a cell in order to change DNA. Like that's insanity. Like that literally is biologically impossible. But people hear the word mRNA and then they think DNA and they think, oh, that's going to alter my DNA. Like I've literally heard grown adults say that. And I'm like, you need to take just like second grade science. Like my son knows that's nonsense. How does my son know that? And like a full grown adult my age doesn't know that. And on the other hand, they think that's not solid. And that's solid science. Like an mRNA cannot go into nucleus. Just period. That just cannot happen, period. It's been proven that cannot happen. So on one hand, they don't want to accept that absolute that has been established through time, peer review, etc. with science. And on the other, they want to hold science to absolutes. I mean, the process of science, not capital S science, to absolutes that are absurd. Like in real time, like guidelines on how to handle a pandemic aren't going to shift. Like it's so like on one hand they want like the ruled measurement where it's like this inch, it's stated, it never shifts. But then they also want the wiggle room on the things that we have already established don't shift. It's just perplexing and bizarre. And I think again, like I'm not meaning that as a trash talking to like you guys out there who might believe that, but at the same time, it's a frustration of mine because again, I don't think you need to be brainwashed by academia or something, but like start exercising your mind, like your critical mind. It's so helpful to do. And I'm not saying you're going to agree with me, but like just the lack of logic in that, where like you can't have it both ways, where you're both going to hold things that are established with time and peer review and all the different things that are strengths of the scientific process. You can't hold that standard and not respect that standard. Like you can't both try to measure by that standard and critique by that standard things that are uncritiquable because they are the process that leads to the absolute. That's the part that's bizarre. It's like, why would you criticize like the real time adjustments and corrections that are going to happen if you're in a lab and you're conducting a freaking experiment? Like, like that's part of how we figure this stuff out. If you watch the thing on neutrinos yesterday, it's like it's taken like 60 or 70 years of a bunch of different observable, measurable things and ruling out, like if a weird thing happens in the lab, you got to kind of rule it out by like repeating it or like putting it in a peer reviewed journal and then having your peers go like, this sucks. Like, that's not true. That can't happen. And this is probably, oh, you had a disconnected cord. That's what led to this. And we can't replicate it. Right. That kind of thing. These are important things that like are not perfect. Right. But collectively we acquire more and more data from it that helps us kind of advance and also create some terrible things too. Right. And so it's like, again, like that's just a process. And it's like, it's just the absolute lack of understanding for that. It's baffling. And I do think like engaging in just critical thinking, go down a logic tree with, on this lecture. And honestly, I think it'll help your brain, not you personally like listening, but just, that was a tangent, but whatever. My point is, let's continue.
But if it's structured at many levels of hierarchy, the concepts inside the concepts are certainly just about invisible, and it really takes some unpacking to get there. So as we build up concepts, they get hierarchically larger and larger and larger.
I want to pause here, and now I'm seeing where. So it's funny because now I'm seeing where he was interested in the origins of language, because like, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but like quite often when I'm streaming, I'm like, what is the origin of that word? Like, where did that come from? Right? Because quite often we're using words and forgetting that the words come from somewhere and that they have an origin, right? And similarly, like categorizations, filing systems, like libraries didn't just exist, right? Like the whole process of like cataloging books and like cataloging knowledge and separating it into genres, like those are all things that all started as like a singular thing that built up and we collectively grew and grouped and made better and better and better and have revised and stuff like that. And that's led to like the modern library, which led to the modern internet. It's not anyhow. It's solid, but it's not as solid as people think. It's an interesting thing. Man, this is interesting. Okay. Adam, again, thank you for this recommendation, because I think even if I don't agree with this guy, all of his conclusions, and again, I haven't really heard anything I disagree with yet, but it's just really thought-provoking and interesting stuff. So thanks, Adam, for sharing.
More and more complex. And I wanted to just give you one example that I thought was really very interesting. And I haven't even scratched the surface of this one, but take a look at it anyway. Take a look at this. This is the notion of a hub for an airlines. I mean, it's just an attempt to show you how we begin with concepts that we acquire when we're very, very young. And I've put here things like ball goes to roll. Roll to wheel. Wheel gives you spokes, and hub and gives you the notion of centrality. I'm not saying these arrows are not necessarily analogy arrows. These arrows sort of represent the idea that this thing is sort of part of that concept. It's sort of gotten incorporated, glommed into that concept. And not precisely, I don't have time to spell it out, but I want you to see this as a series of higher concepts that are glomming together lower ones. These are the lower ones at the top. Excuse for that reversal of directions, but Anyway, so bike is a vehicle. A bike has wheels. A car is a vehicle. A bus is a vehicle. Another type of vehicle is a plane. Then a plane can lead you to an airliner.
So okay, this is really cool because like now I'm predicting a little bit of where this might go to, but it's like I think that this is like I'm curious if this is going to lead to a broader hypothesis of like maybe neural networks work that way, because what he's describing is a little bit like coding AI, and coding AI is a little bit like neural networks. And I know he's like super into cognitive science, and so I wonder if it's like this is also like I'm curious to hear where he's going, because like I wonder if I mean, obviously, he's definitely talking about learning processes by making connections and associations. But it's interesting to see if this. I'm curious to see if this like ties into like actual neural networks and stuff. But it sounds like that might be where he's going. Is like kind of we build these trees, and then maybe those like tie in somehow to how our brains work. Vic said, I think I'm going to actually hit the laundry basket. See ya. All right, Vic. Appreciate ya. And thanks for checking out my stream. And good luck and have fun working on the comic. Hopefully you can get to sleep. Try tea instead of coffee. If you're drinking coffee, that'll keep you up all night. Of course, if you told that to me last year, I'd be like, I'm going to drink a pot of coffee.
Bus is kind of like an airliner. Airliner leads you to the more abstract notion of an airline. Then we have names, which we learn when we're very small. Names suggest that there are things that come in different types. Then we learn about brands. Then we learn about companies. And an airline is a particular type of company.
Oh, I forgot to mention, I can see why he's friends with Chomsky.
And then a trip can be broken up into legs. And legs can be
Chomsky gets heavy into linguistics
and,
like that.
That's attached to airline. It's also attached to a network, time, appointment, timetable, chart, the network, and then this abstract notion of network goes to node, and then we have to get. So that's something pretty primordial. Get. And then when we're very small, we also learn about buy. Please buy me, money we learn about. And then later we learn about economizing and saving money. And then we learn about sort of downsizing and how companies have to downsize. By the way, notice I forgot the whole notion of city and the whole notion of airport. I didn't even put that here. I mean, just imagine all the concepts here that are all required to go into the concept of hub. And yet when we say, Denver is United Hub, do you think about all this stuff? You don't think it all. I mean, you know this as a chunked concept.
That's a really interesting idea.
So it's a very important part of how we think.
I like that too, because again, like, yeah, that is kind of part of it. It's like we just sort of take for granted all the building blocks that led to a result of the meaning. And oh man, this is interesting. I wonder if he'll get into like signified and signifier stuff. This is really interesting. I hope it's interesting for you guys. I'm like super into it.
Another point is that there is no fundamental difference, though, between thinking with very, very basic concepts and thinking with these very large concepts, because the very large concepts become as familiar and we don't see inside them. We don't deal with all the stuff that's inside them. So some of the primordial concepts are these, and some of the more sophisticated concepts are soap opera, hub, sleazeball, wilderness protection legislation, or scientific break-even for laser fusion. Complicated things, but if you're familiar with them, they're just very ordinary. They're as familiar as the back of your hand. I thought I'd illustrate some rather complex concepts, just for my amusement and yours, to show you how amazing our human conceptual system is.
Interesting.
So indulge me with my reading this slide out loud. I'll go down vertically. So we have the solar system, the concept of a slam dunk, a beltway, plagiarism, jazzercise, laissez-faire economics, ethnic cleansing, the domino theory of communism, the next line, Bose condensation or Bose condensate, the Wikipedia. Now I want you to think to yourself, how many levels of structure to explain the Wikipedia, would you have to, if you were to try to explain that to somebody from 2,000 years ago, what would you have to tell them in order to get across the idea of the Wikipedia? You have to explain computers and networks and the web and an encyclopedia and publishing.
Oh, that's a fair point.
And who knows what all. Okay, .com bubble, spam. It's hard enough to understand what a Republican and a Democrat are. That's a very complex concept. Gas war, the Final Four, Y2K, the genetic code, quantum cryptography, a baby boomer, chick flick, WASP, the Fed. I have no idea what the Fed is. I have no concept. A gravitino, I also have no concept of that. I know it's supposed to be some sort of supersymmetric partner to the graviton. Pork belly futures, that's a great one. Fishing with a PH. Radar trap, affirmative action, grocery store checkout stand, presidential lecture, and wacky walk. These are concepts that we deal with very easily, very fluently, and they are so far removed from the concept network that an ant might have, or that a mouse might have, or that a dog might have, or that a 4-year-old might have, or that even a 12-year-old might have. So you have to think how many levels there are. Now, we're talking about concepts at many, many levels. Primordial words, simple words, some compound words, phrases, proverbs. I'm going to come to this. I'm going to sort of illustrate these. And then a lot of our concepts are totally unlabeled.
Let me pause here. You know what? This is actually really good for artists to listen to, because he's also kind of just like, a lot of this lecture has been like the process of like spitballing concept ideas for art. It's like most of the blue sky meeting process, right, when you're conceptualizing, is very much like a lot of spaghetti at the wall at first, and then you kind of start honing it down, and you take all these random kind of things and you go down some weird logic trees of like things that are seemingly connected, and eventually you end up like boiling it down to like some pretty solid concepts. But what he's been describing is very much that. It's really interesting. Adam said, I've been inking some sketch drawings I did earlier, mainly Moon Wizard stuff. I still love that, Adam. I think that's I just like that word, Moon Wizard. It's pretty rad. That makes me want to read your book. So kudos to that. But he also sounds really fun to draw. I don't know if you guys have read like the Off to Be the Wizard series by Scott Meyer. I would recommend that highly, especially on like audiobook or something, because like, man, that has some just awesome wizard action. It's just got some great wizard stuff in it. So, and it's very silly. It's not like a serious high fantasy. It's a very silly pop cultural book, but I love it. I've read every book in the series, the audiobooks. And also the audiobooks are really well read. So I really do sound like I'm like trying to endorse Audible, and I don't have like any sort of link or anything. So I have no agenda in mentioning the Audible stuff. Just let's continue.
Like, for example, my concept, whatever it was, of what happened to me when my dad told me they don't do anything. They're just names of variables. That was stored in my brain, and it was waiting there to be triggered by some event in the future. What was the event? Monica on the floor with the dustbuster. I mean, that was a concept. It didn't have a name. There's no name for Doug being disillusioned by his father about subscripts not being analogous to superscripts in mathematics. I mean, that was a thing in my brain. It was a node. It was there in some sense, or I don't know, node is the right word, but it was there. It was retrievable under the right circumstances. It shared essence. I hope you will agree with me there. It shared essence with Monica's disillusionment. Now, then, so we have a lot of different kinds of things. I'm going to talk about these other things, Me Too's in particular, and scientific leaps. I want to go through this a little bit, talking about how analogy making retrieves one thing at each of these levels. I'm not going to go through them all, but I just want to, name some primordial concepts. I won't read these out loud, but notice, by the way,
let's pause. Adam said, "Really enjoying watching this together." Me too. It's pretty cool. It's a fun experience, and I like hanging out with you guys. Again, like some of this feels, I've talked about this, but like one of the things I love about our community and the live streams, just live streaming in general, is it really does kind of simulate a bit of a bullpen kind of thing, where it's like, this is what I'd do in grad school. Like we'd be in like late night, all in like our little studios on campus that were like a big shared room. And one of us would put on like a podcast or something interesting, and we'd all talk and like exchange ideas and draw and even like philosophize and stuff. And it would inform our art. And so we'd have this just like cool thing going where people are working on their, final thesis, like studio shows, and you have a painter over here just doing collage work, but like suddenly a concept you guys were talking about like ends up in their collage that's like part of this master's thesis show, ends up in a gallery. And then like you have a sculptor over here, and like you have somebody just throwing paint and stuff, but then like they see you inking in a certain way and it starts influencing that. It's like this beautiful thing of like a bullpen kind of vibe with artists. And so not to sound like too weird or whatever, but yeah, that's what I feel like quite often on these live streams, which is actually really cool. We're almost at the 3-hour mark. I'm gonna go ahead and play one trailer. We're not gonna be done till about 2. But I want to play one more trailer, probably the last trailer for the night. I'm going to go ahead and play Adam Lohr's provided me with a clip of Joe Biden, who's apparently a big fan of Jacob's Apartment. So here's that.
I'm the President, Joe Biden, and I just want to say I endorse the comic book Jacob's Apartment by Joshua Kemble. It's a ghost rolled type book, a real ghost rolled book, and you can get it at Amazon.com. It's a sensation. It's taking the world by storm, and I just want to say thank you to Joshua. I just want to say thank you to Joshua Kemble, and I want to announce today that we're actually starting the Kemble Award for Outstanding Amazon Comic. So go check out Kemble. Thank you. Me splits clearly it seems, only in my dreams can I. There's split the seams, and I don't know the part to play in this heart of mine. Please go to Amazon.com.
You heard him. You heard Joe Biden. Go to Amazon, order Jacob's Apartment. He even covered my song. It's crazy. Adam, seriously, that's still one of the funniest things. Also, that was provided by Adam Lohr. You can watch that again on Adam Lohr's channel anytime. Just look up Joe Biden endorses Jacob's Apartment. The bit is sincerely made funnier because of him covering. Like, I played the real Jacob's Apartment trailer at the beginning of the stream, but it's incredibly hilarious because of that. Adam said, I have better, more distinct designs distinguishing the good wizard and the bad wizard now. Awesome. I'm glad there's going to be a good and a bad wizard. You can't have one without the other. I feel like Tolkien crafted a lot of wizard lore that that's kind of become standard tropes that you just kind of can't beat. And one of them is that, Lord of the Rings definitely has that going, where you don't have the good wizard without the bad wizard. Like, it's just great to have those two opposing forces. Okay. So we are basically coloring Mr. Daniel Douglas Home, the spiritualist, from Not Death But Love, the strange supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And we're going to just kind of ride this out. So I'm going to finish the colors, and we'll listen to as much of this lecture as we can kind of get through before it. We actually have gotten through most of the lecture, which is kind of cool. And it's been really interesting, just kind of learning more about like this philosophy is really interesting. So let's continue. And Adam said, yeah, I'm trying not just to directly rip off Gandalf and Saruman. Yeah, you can't, but at the same time, it's like it's so baked into the lore of wizards. Like, I'd be so bummed if I'm reading a book about a wizard, a good wizard, and there's no bad wizard. I want like you kind of have to lean into some tropes with wizards for sure. Also beards. Like, I like my wizards with like pretty badass wizard beards. And I noticed, Adam, your wizard design, your moon wizard design definitely, I believe, was rocking a pretty epic wizard beard, which is kind of kudos to you. That's a hard thing to pull off. All right, let's continue.
This list that I am not favoring nouns. I want you to understand that when I talk about categories, I do not think that categories are always visual things like, overhead projector or shoe or, even audience. Categories can be things like, as I said, please. What that means is there are certain circumstances where that word is evoked. The circumstance evokes that mental concept. It's a please circumstance. There are certain circumstances, if I said please to you now, it wouldn't make any sense. Makes no sense at all. But if I'm a little 3-year-old and I want something and I say please, it makes sense. There are certain circumstances where it is appropriate. And I'm trying to point out here that words of all sorts, whether they're adverbs or prepositions or pronouns or verbs.
So let's, I do want to say, if you're into this stuff, you should definitely check out, if you haven't checked out Chomsky's language work, it's interesting. Noam Chomsky, great thinker, and linguistics, a lot of this stuff is very much building on Chomsky. And so it's again, I'm not surprised. I'm kind of surprised I haven't come across, other than the concept of the brain in a vat. I hadn't come across this guy. So that's again, not a big surprise that he's influenced by Chomsky, because a lot of what he's talking about, this is Chomsky stuff that he's building on.
Or nouns, they are all categories, and they're all equally good. And most of them are not visual. A lot of them are not sensory whatsoever. And theories of categorization mostly are involved with visual categories, visual objects. It's so mistaken. That is not where the action is. And one of my colleagues, who I respect very greatly, said that he thought that categorization at this kind of level is very, very straightforward. It's just a matter of feature detectors. And I think, oh my goodness, we are not from the same planet. I don't think categorization at that level is anything to do with feature detectors. Maybe they play a little role, but it's not, it's really, that's another thing. That's for tomorrow. That's not for today. Okay, simple concepts. Those are primordial. Here are some, they're getting a little more sophisticated. Chair, I remember there was an exhibit of chairs at the San Francisco International Airport some years ago. Wonderful exhibit of crazy chairs. And then I got books of chairs. You can buy.
By the way, the chair thing. So it's funny that they were talking about him incorporating art history into his practice. It did mention at least at the intro that he has a bit of an art slant as well. He mixes a lot of different disciplines. And what he's talking about with chairs actually is this is 100% Dadaist like concept. The chair, the word chair, the chair itself. Like what is actually the object? Is it the idea of the object? Is it the concept of the object? What do we mean when we say chair? What do we mean when we see chair? What happens if we take the word chair and put it next to something that is not a chair? It's these kind of like heavy, like what seem like simple questions, that like, it's funny, you get hit with these questions a lot as a parent too, where it's like, you'll have your kids say, hey, like, I mean, not anymore, but like at some point your kid's going to be like, what's a chair? you know? And then you kind of have to explain chair, but then it's like, but what's the word chair? Is that a chair? Like, you know what I mean? It's interesting. It's definitely a good thought exercise, but it's funny that he's mentioning chairs. I wonder if that is kind of influenced by that. The famous chair art, where it's like one's the word chair, one's a picture of a chair, and then one's the word chair mixed with something that's not a chair.
Buy books of thousands of different kinds of chairs, and the variety is mind-boggling. The same for the letter A. And tell me the features of a mess. If we're talking about visual categories, what are the features of a mess? I would like to know which neurons, which feature detectors in my brain fire when I see a mess. What about the feature detectors for the word probably, or for probably situations? And how about for probably, which we say sometimes and other times we don't? What are the probably situations as opposed to the probably situations? And it's a subtle distinction. Come on! I mean, well, my point is here, with a word like well, I don't know what part of speech that is. It might be an interjection, or I think it's something like an interjection. Maybe it's an adverb. It's a little blurry what it is. But that's not my point. My point is that these words that have nothing to do with visual categories, visual objects, these are evoked by circumstances. There are well situations, and you know how to use them. And if you saw a well in an essay written by a foreigner, or in an email written by a foreigner, you would say, they don't know how to use it right, or they would put some other word in there. They should have put in well. You know where the word well goes if you're a native speaker of English, because there are well ... situations. And the same for high, kind of, but anyway, no kidding, and so forth and so on.
Interesting. Okay. We have to stop. We're at the 3-hour mark. It's getting late into the night, and we finished the page. So I might watch another lecture by this guy at some point. Thank you so much for sending me that video, Adam, the other day, because I got my brain going, and it was just it's just been a real fun discovery. So if you guys are curious, this video is called Analogy as the Core of Cognition. It's on Stanford's main site on YouTube. It's definitely I think they have like 1.79 million subscribers. So definitely check out Stanford's YouTube. And thanks for hanging out with me, guys. And again, I hope there wasn't a lot of background hiss. I might listen back to just a few moments after I end the recording, just to make sure the audio's dialed in and to adjust whatever needs to be. But thank you guys thanks for watching. I wouldn't have gotten a new mic if I didn't have people watching. And so I really appreciate you guys watching this, and appreciate it enough to where I want to try to up the quality of this as much as I'm able. And I also really appreciate the company and the thought play that we're doing on the stream, and sometimes just the stupid jokes that come out of it. It's a lot of fun. But most of all, I hope you guys were able to get a lot done while listening to the stream, and it hopefully helped your creative process in some way. And I really appreciate you guys keeping me company while I got a page done. So now this one I can actually send to my publisher. So that's what I'll do off stream, is I'll print this up and send it to my publisher. And then from there, see if there's any revisions or if we're good to go. I'll also print the copy So that'll go up for the publisher. I'll print a copy and put it in my little printouts because I print the book as it's going so I can make sure the sequence is working really well. And I'll see you guys on the next live stream. Full disclosure, the next few will probably either be like a risk stream or something like that because I'm probably doing a lot of the like basic ground building stuff that I don't like doing while streaming. But I'll try to be active making streams just to kind of hang out with you guys and provide content for you as long as you guys are there to check it out and are enjoying it. All right. Let me know what you think in the comments section. If you haven't yet, hit like. That's a huge help to these videos, and it takes like 2 seconds and it's free to do. So just click that like button. And then, let me know, if you guys are watching this after the fact, you're not in chat. Let me know in the comments section. Was this interesting for you? Was there anything, in this lecture or in the commentary that made you think? What are your thoughts on like kind of categorization and like kind of breaking down complex ideas, complex groups into what they were grouped from, like etymologies, all that stuff. And also, like who knows what'll be on the next stream, probably a risk game. But I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate just having a community to hang out with while making art. And that'll do it. I'll see you on the next live stream, and have a good night, guys. Get some rest after you've done some badass creative projects and stuff. And also, I always encourage people to do this. We have a really great little community building on YouTube, kind of art casters. We've got like all sorts of shows going on. We have like all sorts of artists creating great work. We have people in the hundreds. Like there's this nice little, like he was talking about a hub, and I was going to say, like, I feel like there's like a hub of a movement that's kind of starting on YouTube with all of us. And I would encourage you guys, if you're watching this stream, kind of check out the artists that are like, because I have the settings on the stream so that you can watch the live chat, after the fact. So if you're watching this after the fact, just scroll through the live chat and like check out like Adam Lohr's work, Philip Chandler's work, right? Vic Du, like these are all artists that are working and they're making stuff, and you can check out their YouTube channels. Thomas Adams is a really smart guy. He's always kind of hanging out in the chats. It's like these are, again, like we have a really creative community, and I encourage you to check out other people in our community as well, and subscribe to them as well. Because I feel like the more we kind of, rising tide raises all ships. I feel like the more that happens, the better it is for all of us, and also the more fun it is because we have more thoughts going, and a lot more exchanges of ideas and exchanges of art and stuff like that. So that'll do it. I'll see you guys on the next stream. Thanks for being subscribed, and also make sure you hit the bell so you get notifications when I'm about to go live again. And let me know in the comments what you think of the mic, like if there's things you'd adjust and stuff like that. And that'll do it. And last but not least, most important people, thank you for everybody who hung out, watched this live, and is hanging out in the chats and doing art with me. All right, bye.